welcome.
Well, thank you. Look at Miss Jenny. Is that shoes? I found my shoes and my keys.
Yeah, I had a hard time with key safe. Are you doing Wordle?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to put it away now.
I mean, you don't stop on account of me. Okay.
I don't think I can think
we good?
two different directions.
Mr. Walker not here. He's
He is
virtual
not.
again.
He's virtual. There he is.
He's on business travel.
In his suit. All right, are you all set? You ready? Mm-hmm. Okay.
You go.
All right.
Rock and roll.
All
Let's
right.
get this done.
Let's do this thing. I will now call to order the study session meeting of November 7th, 2022. Members of the public are invited to attend in-person city council meetings in council chambers on the lower level of City Hall. Public access to tonight's meeting is also available on the Local Government Access Channel 8 for Comcast subscribers, on the city's YouTube channel online, and by telephone using the call-in numbers posted on the meeting agenda. Joanna, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Lighty is absent. Mayor Pro Tem Wilford.
Here.
Councilmember Whitkovich.
Here.
Councilmember Jaramillo.
Here.
Councilmember Kondo.
Here.
Councilmember Lukeman Hiromasa is absent. Councilmember Goff.
Here.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Walker.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, first item on our agenda is the City Hall project update, overview of design and budget. Brooke Savoda, Director of Planning and Development, will present the item to council. Welcome, Brooke.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. I also just want to mention that we have representatives here from AMD, the project architect, Stefan and Joey. Also Eric Enzi, Senior Planner, who's also co-project manager, is here tonight. And we will be getting a guest appearance from Jason Loveland, who will also be jumping in on the presentation as we go through this. So just didn't want to leave him excluded.
Yeah, Jason, don't think you're getting out of it.
So I'll go ahead and jump in. This is not on yet. Here we go. Okay, so here we're here to give you guys an update on the budget and the project itself. This is an important slide to keep in mind as we go through this conversation. As you may recall, back in March of this year, we presented to council a budget of 24.9 million. What I wanted to reflect on this particular slide is 10% of that is set aside for contingency. And then there's 4.7 million in soft costs and FF&E, and FF&E is the furniture, finishes, and equipment. So what that leaves us with, in order to go vertical, and this would be the contract that we would award to FCI, is $17.7 million. So that is where we sit today with today's budget. All right, so back on June 6th, AMD presented the schematic design package to City Council, and that represented a 33,500 square foot building and included the sustainability measures as well that was added to the increased scope. So with that, we have proceeded with that design, and okay, yes. So we proceeded forward with based on that design. So one thing to mention here is that with this, the architect and the contractor are in a construction manager at risk format contract with the city, and with that is built in periodic check-ins on bidding and pricing. So with that, FCI went and priced the SD design, and it came in at $26.6 million. That's 8.9 million over budget when you back out the FF&E and the contingency costs. So the main driver here is inflation. As you heard a few weeks ago with 120th, I believe that was 25%. This is 26% over our project budget estimates. So this is not unique to us, as has been previously discussed. But so with that, AMD, FCI, and staff began to do what is called a value engineering exercise. And we actually went through multiple iterations of how can we get this price down and what can we do to optimize and make maximum efficiency of the building layout, as well as also looking at materials, types of construction, the whole 9 yards. What we discovered is there is no path in today's market to build a building for our current budget of $17.7 million. So that is that's the second key component here of the conversation tonight. So with that, we came up with three options to present to council for consideration tonight in terms of how to move forward with this project. We have three scenarios, a 33,000, and I'm just going to round numbers and not give the full number, but you'll understand that we're talking
Yeah.
about each one. A 33,000, a 29, and a 27,000 square foot scenario for council to consider. So with that, what we're going to do is AMD is going to get up and we're going to talk a little bit about the budget. We're going to talk about the floor plans and programming and what that looks like. And then after they wrap up, I'm going to tee up a conversation about budget. And then we'll also look at some other funding sources as well. And then following that, we'll be looking to garner some direction on how council would like to move forward. And as always, please feel free to jump in anytime and ask any questions. So before I go any further, are there any questions of me before I hand it over to Andy? Okay,
I'm not
great.
seeing any hands.
Oh,
Oh, go ahead,
yes.
Councilmember Kondo. Of
Yeah, so this 50%, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
course.
So the 50% increase is largely due to increases in material and direct labor? Is that kind of how we can attribute that?
26% increase.
Maybe I'm doing my math wrong. I was thinking 8.9 million over 17.7 million. Am I
Right, and
thinking
so
that
when I
incorrectly?
say the 25 to 26, when I say the 26%, it was off the 24,000,009 budget. So what we did is after we backed out design and contingency costs, this is what we're left to build with. But yes, to your point, to this project, are we seeing challenges or unforeseen things in terms of means and methods of construction? And what it basically came back is that this is across the board, consistent with what we're seeing out in the market, not just specific to this particular project. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to AMD. Stefan?
Council, thank you very much. So Brooke teed it up well. I'm going to go over what those three scenarios are. Before we get into that, just wanted to have a couple of slides to remind everyone, the mission statement, the project vision that was established early on. North Glen City Hall will be a healthy, safe, and progressive place of work for city staff, an inspiring civic resource for residents, serving as a gathering place and anchor of the Civic Center campus that fosters a sense of pride, camaraderie, and community. Worthy aspirations. This, of course, is language and goals taken from the master plan, as well as the programming document for the City Hall. Community identity, enhance community identity with the creation of a welcoming and functional heart. The City Hall, as you will recall, is meant to be an object in the park building. That was a driver that had been discussed, leading to its form and its unique cosmopolitan character. Its prominent location, the location selected, was due to careful engagement of all sides. It was due to walkable and comfortable pedestrian realm, a meaningful relationship to the Veterans Memorial. And this, iconic civic presence should have a cosmopolitan character and anchor the Civic Center campus entry and east end of Memorial Parkway. And finally, the last bullet point, an important one to remember, set an example of sustainability for the rest of the city. So with those goals in mind, I think we'll just move on to the design and how that evolved within each of these three scenarios. Another reminder, the scenarios that'll be presented, they all assume we are maintaining core green building certification, and they assume a net zero building.
All three options?
All three options, and we'll present the scenarios of what that is burdening the budget. So that'll be very clear.
It looks like we have another hand. Councilmember Kondo, did you want to ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead.
So as somebody coming in mid-course about this, I wonder if you can just give me a quick primer on what it takes to be a core certified building.
Absolutely. So a core certified building is a certification system run by the Institute for Living Futures, and they run parallel to the USGBC, which runs LEED Platinum, LEED Gold, which you may have heard of. So the core certification requires 10 imperatives that you have to meet, and those imperatives are around clean water, Energy sustainability, you have to be a net zero building. You have to lower embodied carbon, which means the structure and materials to build the building have a carbon footprint that needs to be reduced. So concrete, steel is much more carbon intensive than wood. So the assumption is you have a wood structure in this building. There's water reduction. You cannot water the landscape with potable water. And then there are also social equity imperatives that need to be met, in addition to biophilia and connection to nature. So those are the categories, high level.
So as a follow question, I hope you
Sure.
indulge me,
Go ahead.
madam, is, have we done the exercise to figure out if, say, for example, we had the source material that were more traditional in nature, as opposed to meeting the core requirement? How much of an increase would that be?
We have, and we actually have numbers that we'll share with you.
Okay, great, thank you.
So Brooke already went all over these. The breakdown to the right, we don't need to get into. It's simply a way for us as the design team, the contractor, the city staff to keep track of the breakdown of the building and each of those scenarios. So I will use this slide to introduce the narrative. So each of those floor plans that is stacked upon one another. On the top, the schematic design for 26.6 million. That was slightly oversized from program. The target at SD was 31.5. So there, what that means is the spaces were relatively sized correctly. The community rooms, the offices, but the space in the middle, the circulation space, was oversized. So we knew there had to be a tightening, and that's a normal process within a very early concept schematic design as things are just becoming to form. As we moved on to what we were calling the scenario one, that was through 20% design development. And what that means is we went through a process, we got feedback from department directors, from city stakeholders, from user groups and other employees, as well as the core city staff. And we were able to find efficiencies. The programmed spaces, meaning the office sizes, the community room count, et cetera, that stayed the same. But we were able to find efficiencies in the lobby layout. We centralized the primary break room and lounge space for employees to the center of the building. Those online, you won't be able to see me point, but the center of the building in scenario one, you can see a lot of yellow to the edge and corner of the building. So those were the primary changes. It was really about finding efficiencies within the floor plate. And that's a normal thing within the development of the design, is you take feedback and you act upon that. So where we stood after that 20% design development effort was a building that had the same program spaces, the same functions, similar circulation, similar layouts, but we were able to find greater efficiencies.
So did we reduce, I'm sorry, Mayor. Did we reduce the size of that lobby?
The size of the lobby overall, yes, was reduced, but because the geometries were regularized just slightly, the experience of it and the volume of it, we actually have a larger opening connecting the two floor plates. So the opening is larger, the experience of the feeling of it is larger, but the floor plate of the lobby is smaller. That is true. But that's not the only place where that came out. It came out of the hallways on level 2 and a lot of the circulation space and excess open office space that frankly wasn't needed by staff on level 2.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah, go ahead.
The square footage that you show now at 33,500 for the SD design, is that the same square footage we had the last time we talked?
On June 6th.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I am totally following you,
Yes,
because I told you what's going to happen, right?
yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you. You're not alluding to,
No. I'll just stop you right there before you get me in trouble.
yeah. So, and then finally, the scenario 2, recognizing that it was still over budget, we did our due diligence to find a path to get even closer to budget. And that, for that 21.6 million, we removed the curves and the bend of the building. You can see on that green bluish outline, going from the scenario 1 to scenario 2. We straightened the building out. We pulled the council chambers in a bit into the building. The programmed spaces are the same, meaning the offices, the primary meeting rooms. The big difference is the community rooms were reduced by about half. So instead of one large with a divisible partition in the community room, it's now just one community room. The council chamber size stayed the same. That was a requirement. And then the lobby space, I would say, reduced significantly. Not-
I'm sorry.
Councilmember Brown?
Do you remember what the square footage is, Chief, in the community room over at the police department? Yeah, do you remember? Okay. I was just trying to visualize the
Yep.
size, and with the wall, and then we have those two community rooms over at the rec center that we can split with the division. So I was just trying to get a feeling for how big that really was.
Right.
I'll leave you alone now.
Yeah, I don't know the square footage of those, but I know these community rooms were slightly smaller intentionally.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that is the overview of scenario 1, SD to scenario 1 to scenario 2. And we have larger floor plans that we'll get into, so there'll be more of a fine-grained comparison that we can explain. So this was the question that Councilmember Kondo just asked. What is the core LBC and the net zero burdening the project? What is the cost of that? So we'll move along the line, and I don't know if the spreadsheets in front of you are all filled out. That is absolutely fine. In the PowerPoint, they just move along the line simply to be able to focus the conversation. So you can see the core LBC, which includes the all-wood structure, as you mentioned. It also includes other other costs related to the pedals. But the all-in cost of that is broken down here around $750,000. So that's what is burdening the project. On the photovoltaic and the electric building, those are tied together. Both of those create the net zero building. So the idea is you create a building that is fully electrified, no gas is used within the building, and then you're able to purchase photovoltaics to be able to offset that. And that results in your net zero building. So the first step would be, what is the photovoltaic array cost? And the cost line items you can see are around 300 to close to $500,000. The electric building cost, so what that means is you have an upgraded mechanical system and an all fully electrified mechanical system and building system. So that is in the range of 200 to 300K. And if you did not pursue an all electric building, there's not an opportunity to be net zero in the future. Versus if you did an all electric building, you could purchase photovoltaics in the future, of course, if planned for properly.
All right.
So Brooke, as you mentioned, he's going to get into the potential grant funding opportunities that are available.
Councilmember Kondo, are you okay? Do you have a question specifically on this slide, or is
do.
it something? Okay, go ahead.
So, forgive me for my simple math, but basically, how I'm looking at this is if you look at the 33.5 square feet, thousands of square feet for the original concept, and then you go scenario 1, which is at 29.8, that's about 89% of the original square foot area. And then 27.5 is about 82%. So I wonder if you could just help me validate whether my thinking is correct here. That, for example, under the core column, when you look at the standalone reduction number, for example, the original concept is at 25.9 million. I'm just rounding up. So then for scenario 1, it's 23.7, again, rounding up. So that's about 91% of the original 25.9. And then for scenario 2, it's about 20.9 million, which is about 81% of the original. Is that generally how you kind of looked at that? Is your cost savings in the material is kind of proportional to the reduction in the square footage of the building?
That is true in general. We did go through numerous scenarios, and that is true in general. I guess that is there a follow-up question? Because I think you'll notice if what you're getting at is that standalone reduction, yeah, I think that's true in general, but yeah.
Okay. The point that I'm trying to get at
Yeah.
is twofold. One, so I just want to confirm, you're saying that first column there in the blue box is we can dispense with trying to go with materials that would allow us to become a core certified building and use more traditional materials, in which case we're going to realize savings that are represented on the standalone reduction total. Am I thinking about that correctly?
That's correct, yes. Right, that is exactly, so you're saying yes, you said we're gonna forego core, and you take that standalone reduction number, your all-in cost would be 25,880,000.
Okay.
Yes,
So essentially, with the original design, the SD design, we would be saving about 800,000.
right, that's right. You would be saving 720,000.
So it looks like the savings in the core material start to become more appreciable and larger in magnitude when you start to get down to scenario 2. Am I reading that correctly?
That is correct. The estimate on the SD design, the numbers there would probably be a slight variation between that 720, between the SD design and scenario 1.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's an economy of scale that starts to click in, basically.
Yeah, that was kind of weird, because you have 7,200 there for SD scenario, and then you still have 7,200 for scenario 1. I was thinking that, that number would have changed between those two scenarios, no?
Right.
Not substantially. I guess the economy of scale is what doesn't really click in until you
Get down to scenario 2?
drive it down even more. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Then you start to recognize savings.
And just for context, how many square foot area is effectively being used right now in this city hall? Anybody can answer that question?
The total building is near 40,000 square feet, and I think the used space is less than that. It's around 30,000 square feet, if not less.
30,000?
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
All
Go
right,
ahead, ma'am.
thank you. Would it be all right if we let our presenters get through the full presentation and then we hold all of our questions? Because I think we're going to have a really robust conversation at the end. And I know, Councilmember Kondo, we've all had the benefit of being a part of all of the initial conversations for building City Hall. And I know this is new to you coming into this conversation, so I absolutely understand where you're coming from. And I want to make sure that you've got time for your questions.
Thank you.
But I'm
I
hoping,
did come in earlier and I did speak with Brooke during the day today.
good, I'm so glad.
But
cool.
I'm trying to get these things
Yeah.
for my understanding, so I'm making an informed decision.
Yep, nope, that totally makes sense.
Thank you, ma'am.
Let's go back to you, okay?
Absolutely. Okay, so slightly larger plans to be able to communicate some of the comparisons. You can see the lobby space within the first one and the community spaces. The inefficiencies were driven by a lobby that pulled the community spaces apart. There was a design reason for that, but acknowledging that did drive an extended lobby, it drove circulation patterns that were just larger. We did work to keep an overall functional lobby roughly the same size, and then having overall the same size community rooms, but allowing a connected partition to have one large community room function. And so that was feedback provided by the staff, feedback provided by others, to be able to have one larger community room. The other thing of significance is areas that were, back a house or on level 1 below grade, we were able to find more efficiencies by simply, those were back a house areas. And so letting a little more rational geometry drive those also drove efficiencies. And then this 7,500 square foot building, you can see the straightening out that occurred within the blue line. You can see the reduction of the lobby space. We effectively removed one of the 2 community rooms, put on the ground floor instead a business partner work area conference room, which is a place where city staff, council members can meet in smaller groups, but not a large community room. And effectively, by doing that, we were able to pull the council chambers and the community room further away from Veterans Memorial, reducing the overall square foot. On level 2, the level 2 changes were driven by staff feedback and oversized circulation and open office space. The planning department had 2 open office areas that was found not a requirement for growth or current staff. So that was where we were able to find reductions on the back of house. We were able to move this number 2, which is defined as the large conference room. You can see we moved that to the corner of the building. So there still is a presence and a prow and a larger grand space presenting to the community on the corner of the building. But we separated the break room to be more towards the middle of the floor plate to give equity of use to all city staff to the break room in this location, as opposed to putting the break room location all the way on one edge of the building.
I'm sorry, what number is the break room?
That was number 6. So you can see the moving of number 6. And the floor plan, for the most part, remained true from scenario 1 to scenario 2. The large conference room, the break rooms, all remained relatively the same. The meeting rooms that were in an odd geometry due to the bend of the building were regularized due to the ability to straighten out the overall building. So that straightening out of the building, of course, makes efficiencies within the overall system, and you're able to find that savings that way. This scenario 2, we just wanted to, this note, this sketch investigation only, we did not explore this scenario within a full 3D rendering and within the full implications of the design. It was through floor plan and sketch exercises. Hence, just the SD design and the scenario 1 on the screen here. I think the primary difference, I guess to begin, scenario 1 and the DD development was conducted in spirit of keeping the overall massing, complexion, materiality, the sustainability goals, and the overall goals of the project the same. And so a floor plate that works better for the city, the city staff and the overall functionality, I think was acted upon in this scenario 1 as we progressed through the design. The other thing that happened is the overall height of the building was reduced by around 4 to 5 feet total. So the overall height was smaller, reducing the amount of skin and material you have to pay for on the building envelope. The council chambers, we certainly acted upon a security review by the chief, and so being able to give more protection within the landscape and large boulders around the council chambers was acted upon. But the materiality and deployment of materials stayed relatively the same between the 2 scenarios. Just to wrap it up, a couple quick 3D views from the ground. So this would be from the Veterans Memorial. The entry point, the council chambers is a celebrated moment. You can see the scale was reduced slightly in scenario 1 compared to the larger SD design. The curves themselves and the presentation of that curve and the lifting parapet to the corner entry remain the same, as well as keeping the council chambers as that special object to be celebrated. And again, you can see the view from E.B. Rains Park across the street. The community rooms and the indoor-outdoor connection of the community rooms remain the same. The materiality changes slightly near the back house portion of the building, but overall, the presentation on the public corner of the building aspired to remain the same. And quickly before Brooke comes back, this is the tentative schedule. This schedule was written with an assumption that we would be moving forward with some version of the scenarios that are on the screen today. We can talk more about that in general, but there's some nuances there, and I'd like to table that discussion. But this is overall the schedule, a big picture that we would hope to achieve if this project continues to move forward at the current pace. And with that, I'll hand it back to Brooke. Thank you.
Great, thank you, sir. Okay, I'm up here for one slide, and then I'm gonna bring Jason up for his cameo for tonight. So, options for covering the gap. So with this, the other leg to this conversation is how do we bridge this gap? And so Jason's gonna come up and talk about a couple of different options in terms of how we can potentially fund the financial gap. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Jason, and then I'm gonna jump back in on grants, and then we can have a more robust conversation. I'm also gonna add a few anecdotes toward the end here about some of the other assumptions that are built into this to help you guys with I think the two more important things here is timing and choice selection. So with that, I'll hand it over to Jason.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. I guess this is my cameo appearance, so I try not to mess it up. That was a lot of hype for a quick conversation on financing the project, but I feel pretty special right now. So to fund the financial gap on this, took a look at just scenarios that, first and foremost, actually work. These are scenarios being presented to fund the project where we have identified sources that we can make happen. So the first is out of the Capital Projects Fund, using $2 million of built-up reserve that we expect to have at the end of 2022. The 4% special marijuana tax, which is also in the Capital Projects Fund, using $1.4 million of that reserve. And then in the general fund, this is assuming either scenario one or the SD option, the first two options that we took a look at, somewhere between the $3.3 and $5.5 million in order to fund the $6.7 to $8.9 million gap. So the impact for these scenarios looks like this, where the 0.5% sales tax in the Capital Projects Fund would be reduced to about $600,000, with a marijuana tax reduction being down to about $350,000. And then with the general fund reserves, we would reduce those reserve levels down to $12.4 million or $10.2 million, which we talk a lot about the percentages when we talk about the general fund. So that would be a reduction to about 35% to 30%, both of which are above the policy of keeping it over 25%. So we'd maintain that level of reserve, which we have set and required, and we strive to maintain. Let's see. I don't know if we're saving questions. You guys probably do have questions, but we'll get back to them later.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Jason, I'm trying to reconcile your slide 26, right? So with the prior slide, slide 25. So you're saying we need to dip into the general fund anywhere between 3.3 million to 5.5. So then when I flip to slide 26, when you say going from 12.4 to 10.2 million, that's only 2.2 million. And it's not lining up with the 3.3 or 5.5 million reduction, so. what am
Difference
I-
between scenario one and scenario two?
Yeah,
That look like it to you?
we're taking anywhere between 3.5 to 5.5 million out of our general fund to support either scenario one or the original option. So shouldn't the number on slide 26 show going from 12.4 million to say 7 million if you're subtracting about 5 million?
Oh, we're just showing the total. So we're not doing the math on that. We're just showing the bottom line reserve will either be the lower number, 3.3 million, would take that down to 12.4 million.
Okay,
Or if we take 5.5 million, it would reduce the bottom line total in the general fund to 10.2 million. So
Okay.
that's the $2.2 million differential.
gotcha. Okay, thank you.
I don't see any other
Okay,
questions.
yeah. Turn it back over to Brooke to talk about some grants.
Oh, just a moment. I believe Councilmember Brown has a question.
Unless you want me to wait.
If it's related to something Jason's got, yeah, go ahead.
Jason, what are we currently taxing on marijuana? 4%? Does that include the 2.7 that the state does, or is the total tax at 6.7?
So our special marijuana tax is 4%, and that's on top of our regular 4% plus the state and county
2%.
taxes, yeah.
2.7 or whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I'm thinking, right? I'm counting on you to read my mind. Can you figure out for me, when you're back at your desk, what a 0.5% increase on the marijuana tax would look like?
It would look like about $160,000.
So a full percent
So
would be,
about a little over 300, yeah.
okay. I think it's something to talk about. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Jason.
All right, we're almost through the presentation. Next slide here is grant funding sources. So in addition to, we have actually looked on multiple fronts to see what other funding sources we might be able to bring to the table that would enable us to help bridge this financial gap. One of the things I want to mention is that we ruled out any federal funding for a couple of reasons, but the primary reason is that it would Davis-Bacon the project, where we would have to do the federal reporting and also pay the prevailing wage that is established through Davis-Bacon, which in some cases can work for and against you, depending upon the trades that are in that. It generally adds, anywhere from, on a project this size, 3 to 5% in additional cost. And so the money is almost self-negating itself when we look at federal funds. So we looked at federal funds, but we also looked at state options through Department of Local Affairs and also the Governor's Energy Office. And so with that, DOLA has the Energy Impact Assistance Fund grant, and currently it's about $750,000. And also through the Governor's Energy Office, there are 2 programs that are likely going to go live this fall or early next year that would more or less be within the same time frame as the selection process for DOLA grants. We believe that between those 3 different potential funding sources that we could cover core and net zero with that. One of the interesting things that we heard from DOLA staff is that the governor's office is looking for projects just like this, and because of core, this would be the first core municipal building in the state of Colorado, which would be considered marquee. So from that standpoint, we would be very competitive with the Energy Impact Assistance Grant Fund. Also, I would say that with the Governor's Energy Office, it's actually it's not as a formal review process and would also be extremely competitive in that regard. With Energy Impact, for those who aren't aware, it's based on oil and gas revenues, and it's distributed most primarily and focused on rural counties or rural communities and also rural counties. So we typically we don't normally swim in that pond, but because of the nature of this project and talking with the staff, they feel very strongly we'd be very, very competitive in going after those funds. So with that, I will move on to the next slide and talk about next steps. So we're looking for direction. One of the things I wanted to mention is that with the information that you saw on slide 17 with the price estimates, the 20.6 the 24.4 and the 21.6 for each building program. We have programmed into that number an inflation consistent with the inflation rate that you're seeing here on this slide through April. And so what we are basically saying is we've priced in continuing escalation through April of next year. If we take time to further consider this and take more time every month that we spend, not making a decision sooner than later, we're likely adding about $300,000 each month to that cost. So we're in this situation where the slide that was presented by Stefan on the design, development, and construction documentation in May, that's looking like, that's assuming that either tonight or soon hereafter, we would get direction from council on which scenario to move forward with. But I wanted you to understand that time and this other factor of escalation, we've spent a lot of time talking about where the market is and how the Fed rate's influencing the market. And right now, we are not seeing in the trades, as you can also tell with 120th, but across the board, even with projects that are currently going out to bid through Cumming, the price per square foot for construction and horizontal work, it's more or less continuing to escalate at this rate. And this is truly an unprecedented rate. I mean, as a general rule of thumb, in Colorado inflationary for construction, it's about 0.3% per month, not 1.2 to 1.6. So we are truly in uncharted territory here with inflation. And likely, in my opinion, as director and having done this for a while, what we would likely see is a leveling off, but not necessarily a major course correction. So that's another factor in all of this as well. So we're looking for direction with which scenario you guys would like to pursue, and we are here to open it up for conversation.
Thank you, Brooke.
Thank you.
All right, I already see a couple of hands. Quickly, I just want to talk about how I'm going to try and run this process. So I know that there are a lot of questions, and everybody wants to have a moment to share their perspective. We're going to run this in a way that we're going to do comments in rounds. And so once you've already spoken, I'm not going to, I'll see your hand, but I'm going to skip over you until we've had an opportunity for every council member to be heard and ask their questions. And once everybody's had the opportunity to speak, whether or not you choose to or want to, whatever, then we'll jump into the next round and move to the next hands that I see. Does that make sense? Okay, perfect. So the first hand I saw was Councilmember Goff.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So I think my question's for Brooke, and I understand what you were, the way, and I'm glad you explained how the strings attached to the federal funds are kind of making it not worth doing. But I just wanted to make sure, is that also including the new Inflation Reduction Act funds?
Correct.
Those all have, just
Yeah.
because they're federal funds, they have all those.
Correct. We actually, when the IIJA came out and then the Inflation Reduction, they are all federal. And so the other challenge that we have is procurement. And because we're a construction manager at risk contract, that federal government has specific procurement requirements that we would not fall under because we are under a CMAR now. So that's another factor in some cases. There may be some examples out there that it's not the case, but by and large, that's the general rule, is that you have to follow federal procurement. And that was one of our challenges with the 120th, is we had to take the lowest responsible bid, and that there was no negotiation. You just, under the Fed requirement.
Well, it's disappointing, but I'm glad you clarified. Thank you.
Councilmember Brown?
Brooke, say we give you direction tonight to go with the first one. Because I'm really torn whether I would want that building to be smaller than where we currently are, since it's supposed to be like a building for the future and everything. So is your estimate that before April, we could get under contract?
Yeah, so with the schedule, because we have the fancy crossover on the PowerPoint, it doesn't move as quickly. But on the schedule here, this particular schedule would assume that we would have CDs done in April and out for bid. And that's what we're looking for with this scenario right here.
And then we're not talking about taking out another bond or anything like that, right?
No.
Okay. All right, so by the time I mean, this is all cash money that's coming out of our pockets to get this all done, right? That's good, you know, that's good for this one. I think that was really the only question that I had is, do you feel like we could be under CMAR by May? Is that what that's telling me up there? By May? So you have added the $300,000 in a month for inflation?
So I think what I'm saying is that the price estimates are through the end of April, which means we would have bids in May. That's, so I'm not saying there'd be an additional 300.
No, I got you. Okay. Thank you, that's all I had.
I'm not seeing any other hands. You want to go ahead, Jay?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I love the fact that you did include that we are a marquee candidate for the governor's energy office. I think we should really pursue that. And I think that we have great people on our council now that can help make that happen with their expertise. I mean, I can see us just going what we've been invested in this whole time for months, the SD design. We put this much work into it. I don't think we don't have any more time if we're just gonna keep digging ourselves deeper into costs of inflation and everything. We talk about it all the time, and now it's come back to being, you know, that 8.9, well, part of it. So, I wanna stick to our guns with the SD design, because we've been through so much of the process, and I feel like if we just look at that $2.2 million difference between SD design and scenario one, you can see that we could get that with our grant funding opportunities and even just our, I mean, it's just like you're splitting it's really not much of a difference, and we already know, we have envisioned, and we've seen what we're gonna be receiving if we do the SD. I think we just gotta go for it with the SD design now and not look back.
Awesome. Thank you, Councilmember Jaramillo. Councilmember Kondo, and then Councilmember Wakefish.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. So with all due respect to you, Jay, I don't think it's just 2.2 million, because to get to SD, we're gonna have to actually lower our general fund reserves another 3.5 million, right? So if that's the case, we're actually reducing our general fund buffer down to 35, and also for the SD scenario, back down to 30%. And my major concern is that we are entering what I believe to be, on a macro scale, an economic sort of winter with continued inflation. You see that the Fed is anticipating raising rates by another 0.5% possibly before the end of the year, and not an appreciable sort of dent in the inflation rate, even despite having numerous three-quarter point increases. So I'm just trying to think in the best interest of the city. You know, what does the city do? Well, we're supposed to provide, you know, public security, public safety, fire, utilities, all this other stuff. And I just think to myself, it's a good idea at this time now to make sure we have a sufficient rainy day fund in case something else unforeseen comes up. So when I walked into this room tonight, I was thinking scenario two. I am changing my position, however, because of what Brooke talked about, potentially that we could realize maybe $2 million of grant funding, and we would be the first in queue. So my position at this time is going with scenario one. And I don't have any other questions, but I did want to voice my concerns. If you think about the bigger macroeconomic picture, I really do think it's important and critical that we think about having that rainy day fund and margin to be able to accommodate for the unforeseen. That's all I have, ma'am.
All right, Councilmember Wakefish.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I came into this evening thinking I was going to go with scenario two, But Councilmember Kondo asked a great question about square footage of this building and what we're actually using, and I must have missed that before, because I didn't realize we were already using about 30,000 square feet. So I am all for the original design. I would hate for us to go smaller than what we're currently using. I agree with everything that Councilmember Jaramillo said. We've put a lot of effort into this original design, and I know most of us are really excited about it. Reducing the reserves is really scary, but I think this is a great use of those funds. So I am all for the original design. Thanks.
Awesome. Councilmember Walker, did you want to weigh in?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. I am all for the original option.
Okay. All right, I'm going to just quickly
Which one
jump
was he
in.
for?
Original. I'm going to jump in briefly before we go to a second round, because I do see your hand, Councilmember Brown. I am also on board to go with our original design. I'm really excited about it, and when I think about the opportunity that we as a council have to build a new city hall, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and this is a building that is frankly going to outlast every single one of us in this room. And I think that it essentially encapsulates everything that Northland deserves. And it's a space for today and it's a space for the future. I really appreciate how thoughtful all of our council members are about, the funding and if we can make it work. And I have a lot of faith that our cameo appearance from Jason Loveland means that he wouldn't have presented the option of moving forward with our existing design if we couldn't fund it and if we couldn't make it work. I think that perhaps it means that in future strategic planning sessions, that maybe we have to be a bit more nimble and we can't fund every single, idea or whim that that comes to council. And I think that maybe it's time to buckle down a little bit and be really a bit more strategic with our strategic plan. You can quote me on that later.
We will.
I know you will. But that said, knowing that this building is going to be the first of its kind in Colorado and knowing that the governor's office sees this as a flagship building for the state is a big deal. And I know that our residents have a lot of pride in their city, and I want to give them something that they'll be proud of. So I'm good to move forward with the existing plan. And, I hear the concerns about a rainy day fund, but I also think that we're following our policy around what our buffer should be. And our policy is even more generous than what is required, I believe, by the state. And Jason, you can correct me if I'm wrong there. So I think that it is a good, I think it's a good way to spend this money because frankly, if I'm a resident and my taxpayer dollars are being put away year after year after year into a rainy day fund, I don't know that that's a good use of our taxpayer funds, especially when we're looking at investing in infrastructure. So I'm really excited. I'm all in. And with that, let's move to the second round with you, Councilmember Brown.
I'm going to stay on the same subject,
Okay.
okay? Because I'm a rebel. I am actually for the 33,500 square feet, the original design. I think that having been around in this quirky little environment we live in, I have seen the general fund really high from years of savings, but we've already committed ourselves to this before COVID, before, the inflationary element of it. And I also know that we are very capable of pulling back. And if we remember 2 years ago was when I said I wanted to start spending, and y'all almost died. I wanted to start spending down the general, you remember, the general reserve. I think, in all honesty, this would be the last expensive one that I would really be rooting for the next several years. But I am definitely for the 33,500, although I like the windows better in option 2. But I think that, as Mayor Pro Tem said, the opportunity to be a flagship building in the state of Colorado is phenomenal. And the city of Northland likes being the first. I wouldn't want to give up anything that we have going for core or, anything else to go with it. And I really don't want to see us go with a smaller building. It's physically impossible. This building is going to be there for 75 years, 50 years, and you can only see growth I can only see growth in the future. So I am for the SD design. But there are some questions that I have that I don't know if it's appropriate to talk about, but I kind of alluded to it when I was asking about the marijuana tax. And I don't know if that's a different time, you know what I mean? But I would like to revisit that. Yes, ma'am.
What I would suggest, in order to go along with where I think you're headed, Councilmember Brown, and also to Councilmember Condo's earlier comments, I think what would be appropriate for council to do is, in the early part of next year, even could be part of the strategic planning session or maybe a prelude to it, is to sit down and have a long-term financial discussion. We have tightened our belt when appropriate, and as Jason mentioned, investment of the $8.9 million does shift what the 5-year outlook for the CIP looks like. So there are certain projects that are not going to be funded in the short term. We'll maintain roadway investments and routine items like that, but it is going to shift some other pieces, including entryway signage that you're going to talk about tonight. So it doesn't mean we won't be able to do things. It just changes the timing of when we can do things. And so I think if council's open to that, I think that would be really advantageous to have more of a robust, this is what the next 5 to 10 year outlook for the city looks like, not only in terms of general fund reserve balance, but potential opportunities in terms of looking at tax rates. There is a tax expiring in 2026, Jason? 2025 that we need to have a conversation with council about and make sure we start preparing for that tax expiration next year.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Of course.
Okay. Yeah, too bad I can't remember it. Open your eyes, Jenny, that'll make me remember it. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to come back to it at a later time.
Okay. No,
It
that's
flew
okay.
right out my ear. Oh,
Go ahead.
I do remember. So I can remember back in the days when I first started on council, and before that, we didn't move at the speed that we move right now. We are, in the last 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, we've been moving at some great speed.
We have.
And that was to, look at just the roadway plan, right? That was supposed to be a 5-year plan, and we finished it in 3 years, and we were all happy as can be, which I am happy with. But it just means, I feel, that we're gonna have to slow down a little bit, and expect it to go back to the way it was, where we're not pounding out big dollar, projects, one after another after another. I do see a roadmap, a future to saving funds, but it's gonna have to be happening during our strategic planning. And we've done a lot. We've done a lot. We've just done a lot really super fast. And that's what caused the general fund to go down. And, I feel that during strategic planning, we'll be able to slow things down a little bit.
Heather, would you be able, I know you've spoken with the mayor as well as Councilmember Lukman Hiromasa. Would you be able to share their perspective?
Sure.
Thank you.
So staff met, I'll start with the mayor on Thursday afternoon and walked through the presentation, so she had an opportunity to share her perspective. She echoes those comments that have already been shared about doing this project well, so she supports the SD concept. It's a lifetime legacy project. And so she doesn't, she also is excited about the grant opportunities. And I had shared with her that based on feedback tonight, if council supports us pursuing those grant opportunities, that we'll draft a letter to the governor highlighting the project, including, an info sheet on it to really bring it to his attention, even though he's not directly involved in the decision-making on the grant side of things, but to definitely put it front and center, that this is a focal point here in North Glen, and so she supported that as well. Councilmember Lukman Haramasa also supports the SD option. She noted that she does not like option 2, and that while, you know, the options did include some sticker shock, she echoed sentiments about this being a lifetime project and needing to do it well and making sure. The question she asked is, with the lesser options, what is the community not getting? And so that's really based on Stefan's presentation tonight. You see that tightening of the building floor print in the community room space. And that's really going back to the original vision for the building. One area where you heard quite a bit of feedback, even going back to I think the Post-it note exercise when Eric was at the rec center opening, where residents really expressed a desire to have a place to meet and gather. So those are the two perspectives from your colleagues who aren't here tonight.
Thank you, Heather. Councilmember Goff, I think you're the last person that we need to hear from.
Well, I will say that scenario 2 was very sad. I did not like that one at all. And I would have gone with scenario 1, but the cost savings are just not, you know, there. I mean, it's not, to me, it's not proportional for what we have to give up. So I also would support the original SD design, but to Councilmember Brown's comment about the windows, there might be some ways to cut costs on that one a little bit. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that could be something we could still consider.
All right, Brooke. Seems like you've got some pretty direct direction.
We do. And I also want to point out to council that one of the things that we had presented before we ran into this challenge is that we did have a set schedule for regular check-ins with council. So we will repopulate that. And to that end, one of the things I do want to mention is that there's probably still some more opportunity here for value engineering as we move forward. We might be able to still optimize efficiencies in building spaces and whatnot. So, but you've given us the direction that we need to be able to move forward tonight. But we will be checking in with you regularly as we move forward with this process. I believe we have 2 or 3 check-ins with you. And just to also mention is that as we go through this, we'll get a little bit more into the details about what the looks and finishes might look like, so you can weigh in on that. But then after we get through the DDs and finalize that, we will then be moving into the CDs. And the CDs is the final round where we lock it down and we move to the final step of the process. Is there anything you guys want to add or to that? Okay. Thank you. All right, guys. Thank you, council. Yes.
Yeah, just one more question of you. Brooke, this might sound crazy, but when did you find out about the price variance?
So we've been working on this for the last 2.5, 3 months. We actually went out and priced it twice. And so the reason why we haven't brought this up sooner is because there has been so much market volatility that we were really trying to make sure that what we brought to you was a composite that was really going to help you guys make an informed decision. We actually, as I said, we originally went out on the SD and we got a price. We said, that's way too high. We've got to figure something else out. And so that's when we went through all these different iterations of trying to value engineer this down so that we, at least from a transparency standpoint, didn't just say, hey, this is the best we can do and let's just take it or leave it. We actually have gone pretty deep in a dive on trying to figure out how we could possibly get there to budget.
So here's my my one problem. I'm not changing any of this. I wish that somebody had come to us before we approved the budget 3.5 weeks ago and said, hey, this is gonna be a problem of some kind, of some magnitude, even if it was just in estimates at that time, so that we could step back before we voted the budget in and talk about some of the other things that, you don't know. Well, I don't know what I would have cut out of the budget, right? I have absolutely no idea, but I would have liked to have known this before we voted the budget in 3 weeks ago. I think this is considerable amount of money, obviously, and the conversation should have come sooner. Even if that conversation was very limited, right? I would have preferred to have known about it before we voted on the budget. It just would have made me feel a little more warm and fuzzy than right now. So that's my only statement.
Thank you for that feedback, Councilmember Brown. If I may clarify a couple pieces.
Please.
The concrete numbers that you saw tonight were not that concrete until about 2 weeks ago. So I think in a couple of my manager updates, or at least one that I can think of, I believe I alluded to the fact that we're seeing pricing increases on 120th and the new City Hall project, but I didn't have information anywhere close to what is in the packet. So I could not have provided you with those numbers. I understand your perspective and your feedback, and I'll take that and receive it. It just, if I could have gotten those concrete numbers in front of you before the budget was adopted, I would have.
Even if I had known, and I'm not gonna beat a dead dog, but even if I'd known that it was a 50%, of what we're estimating now as an increase, it would have been, nice, that's all I'm gonna say. Because, we're at what, 7.8 you said, or 8?
8.9.
8.9. So say you had been able to come back and say, listen, we've got to at least be expecting a 4%, a $4 million hit on here before the budget. So in the future, I would just
Okay,
appreciate something
thank you.
of this magnitude coming out before we make a final decision on the budget. Thank you. Now, you guys all get busy so that we don't get any more increase, okay?
All right, thank you. We're going to move to the next item, which is entryway signage program. There's this, and city council workshop. Kent Kisselman will introduce the item.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. Thanks for having us this evening. So I'm just going to simply introduce Paul with MIG. I think you approved the contract a few months ago. We've had several internal meetings, and they're here to present some options for entryway signage. And you'll see that you're going to do a little exercise after their presentation. So without that, I'll introduce Paul and Paul's team and let them take over.
Welcome, Paul.
Thank you. Thrilled to be here. Good evening. Paul Kewen, MIG, and we have started the process of starting to take a look at your entryway signage. And I want to emphasize that this is basically the start. We're going to use this presentation. Hopefully I can make everything work correctly here. We're going to be using this presentation to get you up to speed on where we're at in the process, what we've done in these first few steps. And that includes, the scope of work, what we're going to be doing as we move forward in the design process, how your entryway signage has been handled in the past and under the old logo and the current logo, and also start looking at entryway signage precedents and materials, and that's where the exercise comes in. And so that's basically what we'd like to achieve tonight. We're really not asking for any specific directions on options. Kent mentioned options, but we're not going to say, here's option 1, 2, and 3. We're not at that point yet. Towards that end, you can see that we have the task we're in now, which is evaluating the existing conditions and signage, and then looking at precedents from across the state, across some other areas of the country on what people are doing for entryway signage. And once we get your feedback on this particular step, that's when we'll begin to develop families of options. And we'd probably come back with 3 different families. There's some nuances within tonight's presentation we're looking to get direction on. And then once we have direction from you on a preferred option, then we start developing that option, refining and incorporating your comments, and then we'd come up with an opinion of cost, and then we'd get into an implementation plan. I understand, as I mentioned, some of the priorities have changed a little bit since when we started this process, but we're prepared to move forward with that scope of work. Some of the guiding principles we're working under is mainly, this is about enhancing Northglen's brand. North Glen to me is really I've been in the North Metro area since '81, and it's really, in my mind, an upcoming and growing city with a lot of strength and tremendous improvements in the recent years. And I think this is an opportunity to play on that and really put your mark in the suburban context here. We want to make sure that we think it's a good opportunity to define North Glen. And anybody driving without a North Metro area has trouble figuring out what city they're in at the time, and we think that's a great way to do it. Not to mention identify your facilities. Gosh, is that a North Glen Park? Is that some other entity? Luckily, you don't have a Highlands overlay on top of your city or something like that, making it more complicated, but that's still, I think, an important thing. School district versus North Glen, that sort of thing. And also, create a consistent message. We'll show you that in some of the examples we cover. What we do here can be incorporated into future signage studies you'll be doing. Building signage, park identification signage, I think Parks Department is looking at that. Those sort of things can feed off on what we're doing in this program. Some of the nomenclature we're going to be dealing with are Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 signage. Tier 1 is the signage that you typically see along the I-25 corridor. The North Glen block letters in the logo that you see on 104th and 112th, those are example of that. Other cities have other examples, which we've shown, and I'm sure you're perfectly aware of. Westminster's, Thornton's, great examples. Tier 2 are arterial gateway signage or entries to the city. Examples of those are like at 104th in Washington, I-25. What we've called Tier 3 are smaller, what are known as blade signs, and those can be in a number of locations across the city. Your major facilities, your parks and maintenance operations, the maintenance center, any park, you could put a sign like that at a park, that sort of operation. So those are the basic sign types we're going to be dealing with in this process. Our current scope as it's structured right now is to focus on Tier 2 and Tier 3, which are the gateway signage and the facility, community facility identification signage. The Tier 1 signage was studied in 2015 and 16. We'll bring those up again because some of you were not on this board during that process. And we'll show those again. And so we're funded to look at that design process. And some of this information is new to me tonight. And so funding is expected for implementation is expected to be available in 2025, and our goal to be positioned with the various families of signs in place and ready to go. What I mean by sign family is basically a group of different scaled signs that all they share common materials, common colors, common typography and messaging, but they hang together as a group. And so we would present 3 different options on that, reach a consensus, and then adopt the family of Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 that we would move forward with in the design process and pricing and implementation process. Your existing signage, and for entryways, you have the main signage on I-25, which has the former logo, which is the evergreen trees, mountains, plains, and script letters. The 104th has the block North Glen, so there's an update on that. But in general, that's a common theme in most of what you have on the ground today. The script N with the larger North Glen N, that's even incorporated on some elements that you have within your city, such as columns on Washington Avenue. You see example there from one of your underpasses. So this is what the public is generally seeing in the way of entryway signage. The questions we have that we'd like to hear from you, and an opportunity either after my presentation here or as part of a post-it note comment, do we retain any of these elements from the existing signage? For instance, the sandstone slabs on either side of the signs that you see on the lower left signs are from 104th, and those are found in the median on 104th. Do we maintain those? Do we retain any elements of the logo, the 2015-16 Tier 1 signs that were developed? Did bring forward some of the elements from the older logo because it just switched over at that time, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, I guess. Some examples of how the current logo has been applied within the community and the city. As you can see, there's a lot of different treatments. The Justice Center on the lower left is quite different from the Recreation Center, which is different from the signage for City Hall in Croak Reservoir. So the consistent feature is the application of the new logo, but beyond that, it's a real mix in not a lot of consistency. There are guidelines for your logo in identification signage, North Glen with the words. But the goal for this process would be to make that consistent across the board. We are also going to be looking at, just as a quick thing to go through some of the elements that we'll be considering as we go through the process, some of the design framework, as we've called it, and one is the context. North Glen is obviously surrounded by Westminster, Federal Heights, and Thornton, and so you're kind of in an island surrounded by your other neighboring communities. We'll want to take that into consideration and how we distinguish that from your neighbors. How the signs are applied to each ward, making sure each ward is clearly identified and the features are identified within the wards. We want to take into account all of the gateways, and most of the gateways we've identified are Washington, Huron, 112th, 104th, and that's in Claude, and those have both, in some cases, have a north and south or an east and west entry point. Washington is not misspelled. We just got a little font thing going on with the N slopping over in the slides, so a little bit of technical challenge there. So those are the things that we will be considering mostly for the Tier 2 signs. Where they are now, we've highlighted where the existing signs are now, and you can see we've got a lot of your entry points identified, but quite a few of them are not, and that's something we'll think about as we move forward. There's a number of opportunities that hopefully you can see if you've got a larger version of this PowerPoint, things that we're going to be considering, restrictions on right-of-way. For instance, on Huron southbound from 120th, does the sign go up on the north end, on the east side for southbound traffic, which doesn't make a lot of sense, or do we wait until we get down to 112th because we have right-of-way on both sides? So there's challenges like that that we're going to be considering, opportunities and constraints that will go into this process. And then beyond that, where else within the city do we want our signage, to say the Tier 3 signs, I'm sorry. Is Tier 3 placed at each park, at each city facility? Do we have one on Community Center Drive for this complex and EB Rains? Those sort of considerations are going to come into play during this process. And of course, that all wrinkles through into the budget. If you have X number of Tier 3 signs, the costs go up. X number of Tier 1 signs, the costs go up. And speaking of Tier 1, this, for reference, is the design that was created and bid in 2015 and 16. As I mentioned, you can see it incorporates a lot of the sandstone, the North Glen logo, the North Glen block lettering, and brings in the evergreen trees from the old logo. So there was a bit of blending of old and new here. A number of things were studied for this sign. This was to be placed at I-25 at 104th. And our question, is this still a valid concept? In other words, would we play on this for a family of Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 signs, or should we strike off in a different direction? And just for reference, back in 2016, the whole Tier 1 signage package for all of the utilities and landscaping, all of the engineering that went into it, was about, the bid for construction was 1.7 million. Now, as we know, that would be a considerable amount, larger figure in 2022 dollars, but all of the improvements associated with this sign around that interchange was a pretty significant project. The other question that we have here is, do we look at including Tier 1 signage in the work we are studying in 2023? And once again, our scope was written for Tier 1, or Tier 2 and Tier 3, and Tier 1 was going to be added as a future phase primarily because at that time, we were thinking implementation for Tier 2 and Tier 3 was going to happen this year. With it moving to 2025, do we want to think about including Tier 1 into the design process and look at the entire family of entryway signage? Other thing we'd like to get feedback on is how much public outreach is appropriate for this project. Is this something that the public should weigh in on? Is it kind of more of something that really the public is not as interested in and may not want to be involved in as much? If we do bring them in, at what point do we bring them into the process and on what platform? Do we wait until summer months where we can have a pop-up tent, an intercept event at one of the festivals? There's a lot of considerations that would go in if we feel public output is an important part of the process. And finally, we do have the interactive workshop set up here, which really is what these boards are for. And it's some of the same information we've shown you in these slides. And this is where you get us an opportunity to say, what am I drawn to is what was the suggestion that we add to these things. Something about the original signage system you really like, you'd like to carry forward. Something about some of the new applications that you see that you think is particularly evocative of what Northglenn is and wants to be as far as its identity and brand. That's sort of covered on some of these boards to my right here. Across the back, we've got a lot of precedent images, things from other Colorado communities. Some you're going to recognize, some you might not. We've got other ideas from other parts of the country. Do we want to do something more innovative as far as entryway signage goes? One thing that, if you'll notice some of the Colorado examples, one of the designers on our team said, you could change the names from Westminster and Thornton, you could switch them around and it really wouldn't make a whole lot of difference because they're all using the same materials and the same features and things like that, which is understandable because obviously we have got a lot of great opportunities for stone and brick here in Colorado that other communities don't have, especially for stone. So the question is, do you want to do something more innovative, more striking that goes off in a different direction and maybe something that fits in more it's closer aligned to your current bright and I think kind of more modern logo that you've adopted. And we've also got some other boards you see in the other corner of the room that talk about materials. Once again, if there's something that you see that's a material that's used now in some of the city buildings, we'd like to get your feedback on that. And the way you do that is you place a green dot on things that you think, wow, this is exactly what I'd like to see for Northglenn. This really is evocative of our town. This represents what we'd like to be, or this material doesn't belong. We don't really want to see this on anything that we would do for our entryway signage. And if it doesn't kind of stir emotions in your mind on what is appropriate, just don't offer a dot or a comment. We do welcome the post-it note comments are a great way to add your thoughts and elaborate on what you're thinking. Certainly recommend that. There's various piles of all three of the materials and pens on the chairs around the room. And both Mackenzie and I will be available to answer questions and as we break into the workshop.
Wonderful. It looks like we have 2 questions before we jump into the workshop, which I'm
Excellent.
very excited about. First, Councilmember Goff and then Councilmember Kondo.
Okay, thank you. So my question is about the Tier 1 option from 2015, 2016. And you had a question, should we carry this one forward? Well, my question is, if we say no, then are we going to have to be involved in like another study session or whatever, planning, hiring somebody to work out a new design and go, is it going to delay things even more and there will be more expense involved? That's kind of what I'm asking.
The scope that we've written was for Tier 2 and Tier 3, and so if we add Tier 1 into the process, now we have graphic designers and marketing design folks on the team from MIG, and we would be able to add the Tier 1 signage to the scope, but we'd have to figure out exactly what that means from it certainly would expand the scope. I'm not sure what that has to do with the dollars because the funding we have for 2022, we're not going to use all of. So
Right.
I'd look to staff to help us figure out what that means from a budget standpoint. But yes, there would be more work involved, probably a more, I know the design in 2015, 16 was an extensive process involving NURA and a lot of different people and a lot of public input. So yes, that would require
So
some discussion.
If we say we like that one, you know, the tier one, and we'd like to carry that forward, then I'm assuming that the tier 2 and 3 would like reflect that in some way.
Absolutely. If there was general agreement from this group that, hey, that's a good sign, it was vetted through that process, let's carry it forward, then it's a simple matter of just adding a tier 2 and a tier 3 to that. And then we would probably come up with a different set of we'd have to come up with a tier 2 and tier 3 concept for, that would be other options.
I mean, I have to say, I do like that one, and I think in terms of it being distinctive from Thornton, North Glen, Westminster, or whatever other places, our logo is, I think, pretty distinctive. So if that's incorporated in it, I think helps.
Okay.
Councilmember Kondo? And then Councilmember Brown.
Yes, thank you, Madam Pro Tem. I wonder if the more senior members of the council here can educate me as to the legacy of the sandstone, because I don't know what the connection is unless any of you happen to have some idea.
I am trying to remember. I think we liked it.
Okay, so there's
Are
no
you talking
historical
about the ones
reference
like
or,
at 104th?
well, I'm just trying to figure out what's the city's connection with sandstone.
I don't, the ones that are, not like the one that Catherine is looking at, not this one, but the old ones. Those are so old that I can't even give you any history on those. I mean,
Okay.
Debbie, do you know any history on those? You were part of the process with NURA, so, sorry, you put food in your mouth.
Well, what we had done was, back in 2015, NURA had budgeted $500,000 for new monument signage and the ramp on both sides. And after many months of coming to council and going with NURA, this is the sign design that we had done. Again, we had budgeted $500,000, and the budget came in at 1.7, and that's where we put a halt on it. It has been totally designed, so if we wanted to use any of these concepts, I think it would be less expensive than starting from scratch.
But going back
regarding-
to my original question, what's the city's association with sandstone?
Oh, with sandstone, I don't know if there's any correlation with the sandstone by any means. It was just they liked that material. We did a similar kind of exercise with the architects that we had worked with before, similar to what you're doing right now, going and looking at the different pieces. So I don't recall anything with the sandstone that was the magic, right? Looking at some of the historical ones, looking at these, I would agree with Becky, that was way before our time. I've lived here all my life and they've just always been here. And you can see that they tried to keep some continuity with some of them. But again, that was before my time of how those were designed.
Thank you.
Councilmember Brown.
I'm a little confused, so please help me understand. So we're not doing anything in 2022 on this, right?
The
'Cause there was
design.
a little part where I got confused
Sure.
whether we were.
So the work that's being done currently is design work. And so that'll carry into next year. And then if council wants to add the tier 1 component to the scope, then we can come back to council. And if the architects need to go and do a different iteration than what you see in front of you for tier 1, then we'll come back to you. Paul will work up what's this going to cost council in addition to the existing scope, or will it fit into the existing scope? The next piece is about funding the improvement. So in the 2023 budget that council adopted, there's $500,000 set aside for entryway signage improvements. That number has changed because of the 120th project and new city hall project. So what it does is it pushes that, and that number is really a placeholder that we plugged in. If you asked me, what are we getting for $500,000? I would not be able to tell you other than that was a placeholder based on some initial estimates to do tier 3 and tier 2 signage, knowing that the tier 1 signage is more of a significant investment in the millions of dollars.
Right. So in 2023, we have $500,000 in a pocket, right?
On paper right
On
now,
paper.
but that's changed already based on
So that's
the
gone.
decisions. It's been reallocated to 120th.
Okay, so there is no budget, no money in the budgets for 2023. You're talking about putting it into a budget for 2025.
Correct.
My question is how things change, how art changes, how perception changes. If we're not going to move forward to 2025, are we jumping ahead too far? That's really my question. Are we, because by 2023, when we go into budget talks, we will already be talking about where we can cut money and save money, unlike this year's. So my concern is moving forward twofold. One is that I just spent $8 million on the city hall. That's my big one. And my fear is any kind of public engagement after just doing that with City Hall is not going to be positively for signs. It's not going to be a positive experience that we get from it. I'm just wondering, are we designing and planning too early? And are we designing and planning this too early to even know what we're gonna want in 3 years or in 2 years?
It depends.
Yeah,
If council wants to hit pause on this project, and then re-engage in the project a couple years down the road, you certainly have the ability to do that. Part of why we're moving the project forward is it's part of the strategic plan.
Right.
As you know. And so, yeah, there's a timing consideration here that is important to think about.
And I know that it's in the strategic plan, but it would be one that I would not be opposed to not making and to extending it out in the strategic plan. Because when I look at the overall, and I could be totally crazy, but when I look at the overall importance of replacing our signs and some of the other things that we're gonna have to pull money back on, I have to wonder if this is a necessary step at this time. I mean, I don't have a problem doing the exercise and all of that. I'm just wondering if this is a necessary step and even a discussion that we should be having.
I think that's a good question, Council. Councilmember Goff?
I just kind of wanted to answer that. I think the way to tackle this is to decide if we like that 2015, 2016 design, and if no, then maybe we can just put this all off because we're going to have to start from scratch. But if we like that one, and to me that looks pretty timeless, I mean, I don't think, I like it. I wouldn't have a problem with going with that. Then however the next steps are, as people are planning through designing the tier 2 and 3 to coordinate with that, I think that it would be fine to move forward on that. And that's not, it doesn't sound like that part would be that. Or is it just, even that part is going to be on hold?
That part will be on hold too.
Okay.
So like I was saying, the initial placeholder was with tier 2 and tier 3 signage in mind, not the significant capital investment that
Right.
you would need for tier 1, which is the highway signage.
Right, I guess in my mind, it's like, I'm just thinking if we like this one, then we just don't have to worry about, redesigning a tier 1 signage. And then we could just move on with the 2 and 3 whenever that's.
So I want to just quickly clarify what I'm hearing. It sounds like there are 3 options on the table, and Heather, tell me if I'm just totally off base here. But it sounds like there's an interest in hearing from council around, 1, do we want to press pause on this project for now? 2, do we like what's been presented up here and want to move forward with that? Or do we want to move forward with the exercise of giving feedback and looking at materials? Is that fair in terms of the direction that we go with this conversation? Yeah? Okay, then what I'd really love to have happen is to just go around the dais and hear from everybody. And then we'll make a decision. We can figure out where we're going from there. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. You know what? I did want to just throw in one thing, that we do have the consultant in the budget for this year to do this work. But from a communication standpoint, sometimes we do signage that's internal, and you'll see some of the boards out here have all of our current signage. So coming up with a design standard, I don't think means we're going to spend millions of dollars right off the bat. I mean, you have a budget and you have a strategic plan. But I did want to also throw out there that having like, hey, this is the look that we like. We have a city hall that's going to be built. We're going to have signage that's going to go around that. We're going to have new parks that are going to be built. So I did want to throw out there that it isn't just about spending millions of dollars right now. It could be a design package that really, it's the next 10 years, it's the next 15 years. I don't think that's wrong. And, we do have a kind of look that's starting to evolve already. Do we want to just keep having it evolve for each individual project, or do you want something more holistic? So I just wanted to throw that out there, because when we're looking at it as staff, yeah, it has a big price tag, and we're not sure that's going to move forward. But we also make internal signs. We also, do parks all the time and that kind of thing. So I just didn't want you to think super big all the time, because it does have impacts on other things as well. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Nope, thanks, Diana. So I'm going to hop in and go first, because I can tonight. But I feel like we've got the consultant here. They've got all their materials set up. I don't think it hurts to take 10 minutes and just give some feedback and go ahead and think and dream for a few minutes. And that way they've got something to move forward with. We can get some additional pricing, build out the design standard, and figure out what this may look like in the future. I don't think we have to make any funding decisions. So that would be my recommendation, but let's just quickly go around the dais and hear what everyone has to say. Go ahead, Councilmember Whitfitch.
Thank you. I'm fine with doing that. I also agree with Councilmember Goff. I mean, I like that design, and a lot of work was put into it, including with Nura. So I would hate to just, scrap all that, but I'm all for the fun workshop.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I concur. I agree with both Mayor Pro Tem and also Councilmember Wikovich. I do like the design. I like of the tier 1. I like that design. I like the one you have. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So I like that, and I want to check out what else you guys have. It's exciting. I'm a visual person. I'm an artist, so I want to check it out.
All right, Councilmember Kondo.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm in agreement with my colleagues. I do want to express, I think, what Diana just said. If this is all about establishing a brand, how should I say this, a brand identity and philosophy, I think that would be okay. But in view of the conversation that we had earlier tonight, I think we do need to start to think about discipline in terms of spending for capital projects. So in that regard, I am in Councilmember Brown's camp.
Okay, thank you. All right, Councilmember Goff and.
Yeah, I'm willing to go through this activity here. It sounds like. But, and Diana's comment too, though, made me think that, if the question is, we want to be kind of consistent in our signage, we already have kind of a big variety of signs. The Justice Center doesn't have the city logo on it. It's kind of hard to read anyway. It's not my favorite sign. But, and maybe this sign would look great, by the I-25, but maybe not so great with our new city hall. So, yeah, I think this activity would be.
Okay. You good?
I like this sign. We put a lot of time into it. I do like it, but I hear what you're saying also. I'm totally hearing you because I'm trying to picture it on 104th, and I'm trying to picture it, in different places. I totally respect consistency, because that's what we've done through Nura with a lot of our shopping centers and things like that, started to move towards consistency in the lettering or the size and the colors. So, I mean, I think that it's a great exercise. I think that when we have our strategic planning in April or whenever that's gonna be, we need to really start talking about where we're at back from. Because I'm very, earlier today is weighing on my mind, like it always does when we have something that goes out of range like that. But yeah, I'm more than willing to do the exercise.
Okay. And Councilmember Walker, I know you can't physically do the exercise with us tonight, but do you want to weigh in?
Yes, ma'am. Well, Ms. Diana was kind enough to send me the images beforehand, and I gave her my Post-it notes virtually. So I agree with doing the exercise tonight, and we'll kind of re-examine some things later.
Okay, perfect. Well then, council, does 10 minutes feel like plenty of time? Yeah? All right, well, let's break and let's get down in there with some sticky notes. Go ahead.
As we go through the process, we can work within the framework. We don't, you mentioned, Commissioner Kondo, you mentioned what's the relationship with the sandstone. If you have other materials that you designate here, it's possible to keep the exact same form here and change some of the base materials. Is brick more appropriate? And we can come back with you with some of the family options that keep the same forms, don't change the sign blade itself or the logos, but look at different materials for the basis. And so we can start playing with where that makes sense. As we develop options, we can make those minor tweaks to the 2015-16 plan.
All right, well, let's do this.
Do you want me to put we'll be back in a minute slide or do you want to follow around?
No, I'm actually doing pretty good. I've had 2 treatments.
Ooh, really?
Yeah. Much better today. I'm asking the expert if there is a relationship with sandstone.
You texting me?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
I'm sorry. Is there for me too? I didn't see anything. My Atkins bars are all gone. Significance to the city. I'm using my phone a friend option and checking with Joyce to see if she remembers it.
Yeah, I was thinking I could check with her.
I'm getting water.
I think Rosie, yeah, I mean, I don't think there was a relationship. I think it was just.
There was a design.
It was the product in that time, you know what I mean? It was whatever was popular. Well, there's an Atkins bar. Oh, I totally agree.
There's no implicit bias there, is there? That particular sign did not say anything.
Oh, no, I didn't.
I joked out, I was like, that's pretty good.
It's all right. Oh, it was really, really good. Yeah.
And I like that it's more.
Yeah, Joe has more of it. And, you know, we're not. It took 2 hours. Yeah, well. You know, she got the, please don't ever do that against me. But, she thought it was funny. Yeah. Yeah, she thought she was being funny. She said, what did she say? She didn't say joke, she actually used the right word. Vocabulary is right up. Meaning, I found myself laughing. Yeah, smart girl. Got crazy. You're a smart girl.
Yeah, they come out, they've got cameras everywhere.
How's all?
The newer stuff with the rec senior center. And then here are additional material options, kind of more classic, and then getting a little more wacky as we get towards the end. Okay, great.
Creative.
Creative, yes. Avant-garde.
Avant-garde, yes.
I really don't like that city.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
So, another question.
Some of the numbers, yeah.
Logo, versus lit from the front. Yes.
Yeah.
No, I'm just.
Yep.
I don't even want to know.
Ashley's just over here. Oh, you're doing it for me. It's like,
Joanna, have you received your pendant yet? Your pendant from Tommy?
Oh, I need to ask the, Eddie and,
Randy?
wasn't Randy, it was the other guy, I can never, not Shaggy, the really tall guy. Came by today saying that they were looking for number 11 because it had been activated. And so I looked in Ashley's drawer, she wasn't in today. And we have she had 2 in there, numbers 9 and 13. And I forgot to follow up and ask if one of those was intended to come down here. I don't know. So we might have, I don't know. But then I think they came back to put batteries in them or something. I don't know. Not quite sure what was happening.
Okay. Well, let me know if you hear something.
Oh, yeah, that's kind of. No, it's actually, yeah.
I finally found
No.
it.
Yeah, we did it.
I'm not that hard to please, but yeah. Ken's like, you're not supposed to be voting. I'm like, it's from the iteration.
Oh, that's good. Thanks for doing that.
Did you by chance, did you have any issues with the Noel email to council? It's pretty innocuous, but it's.
Did I not respond to that one?
I don't think so, but I should probably send it to her.
Can you resend it so it's at the top of my inbox? I'm sorry. I thought just here's what this is.
If you're interested, this is what you can do. I don't wanna, just a discussion.
It's more of a here's what to expect, not here, give me feedback.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
here's what we're doing, here's what we have set up for you to do. Let's start, we're that interested.
Do you feel like you need to do the here's what we're doing? Or? Okay, resend it to me.
That's why I told you to send it.
Okay.
There's been some discussions about it that I did a little bit more than I did.
I thought you got the direction you needed on.
I did, but I
Okay. Manage expectations, yeah, okay. If you resend it to me, I'll look at it tonight or first thing in the morning and get you feedback.
That's okay. Yeah, I just wanted to know if there was some sort of historical connection with sandstone.
But, you know, I think we had a sandstone one design in there, I think specifically just to see if it was consistent with our other stuff, so we didn't
Yeah.
have to change everything else.
Yeah.
So I think that was part of it, but I can't tell you the regional reason.
Was part of that design also including some sort of lighting?
Yeah, it's got a
Because-
light packaging, both
those like-
backlit and front.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's got the landscaping, the water, so landscaping, water, electrical.
There's no water feature.
There's no, it's just to be able to water the farm.
Water, and it would be like zero-scaped
Zero
around.
scaping. I was like, what did we,
Yeah.
we went back and forth on that. A lot of the cities, they have full racks
I
all
know,
the
it's
way
crazy.
around there. It's like, no.
Can't afford that.
No, we can't afford to maintain that, let alone water it, right? So, yeah.
You know, the funny thing is when you look at the other cities,
Mhm.
their tier one signs, kind of the same.
Yeah, they are.
So it's like,
But like he was saying, I mean, had some things, you could take just about any of the cities, like they all kind of look the same, right?
Yeah.
And that's what municipal, I think government looks, there's a government look, right? And you can see
Right.
like a government look to a website. If you go to government websites,
Yeah,
you'll see
they all
that
have
they're
that similar
same
look.
feel, yeah, same look, same feel, same navigation.
Yeah.
well, if you look at a lot of corporate websites, they all feature this color blue.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a corporate blue out there,
Corporate blue, yeah.
and it's crazy. But anyway,
Is your son gonna get to come home
Yeah, I
for?
think the piece here was, it was a lot of.
If I get him a plane
To
ticket.
try to figure out. I don't know if this
Except he
is
still needs
the
to
right
get
one
me
now,
dates
but
of when
it
he
was
can come
Retreat City, you know, it
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of gave you that historical feel.
I definitely like.
Forgot about Thanksgiving.
And
Because he
then,
came home for a
there were some
concert
people.
Oh, did he?
that he thought
He was kind of
needed to go to
compromising.
because
How
he'd
did the
already
new
bought the
logo
ticket.
come about? Was
Which that was
that
fine.
a contest?
It was his
Uh,
first time
or
flying
somebody-
No,
and
it was,
everything,
we had
and
somebody.
he did really well, yeah.
Good.
But,
And then I
you
was
know, there's
thinking,
people
okay,
that
next
have been here
for
forever and
break,
they like
Christmas.
You know, they like.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then
They,
he's
they
like,
like
my
it
husband's
being
like,
open, so
Thanksgiving.
I know if he doesn't,
I
like,
don't know, maybe he
He's
could
in
go to
Eugene.
his,
So that was a lot of.
no, right, above in Corvallis.
Boy, that price. went up.
Okay,
I
So
mean,
Eugene
we
is, I think, about
budgeted
40 minutes.
$5,000.
but you're saying
South.
the 1.7 back in
So he flew out
2015.
of Portland the
But
first
we
time,
budgeted
and
500,000, thinking that's what it's gonna cost.
I don't know.
Oh,
Then
it
we
came in at
spent, then we
1.7.
spent 700.
So he actually flew like Alaska
more than
Air
just
out
on
and then
design.
Southwest back.
It's like
Yeah, that's right.
725
Alaska does
design,
a lot of, yeah,
and then it
that's
was
pretty
like, yeah, all the other stuff.
good
Shoot,
deal.
then if you have that sunk cost, you ought to just pick the other district, tier 2 and 3, sooner than that.
It's gonna
Well,
get
there
really
was, I mean,
expensive.
I have
the
a-
package, the design
A
package. is not that big.
non-transferable.
Because, I
think
mean, there
it
is
goes
so
back to
much.
last year,
So,
I had
it,
to
you know, it'd be,
cancel
whether we
a
use.
conference.
At least the electrical utilities and $8.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's,
I don't know if I'm gonna get to
what
use
is
it.
that?
And I can't transfer it, otherwise I would have given it
It's just
to
Yeah, yeah.
pretty much that
niece or nephew
underground
or
stuff is really important.
I'm not
Well, the symbolism
planning
is
on
also
doing
meaning,
the trip
I
for
mean,
work
we're
until
at
maybe
Mile
March.
High and,
Yeah.
you know, we're
Yeah.
high desert,
Mm-hmm.
high
Yeah.
prairie.
When I booked
guess
his
it
flights
helps.
Yeah.
Kind of
for
gives you
his
that
trip a couple
sense.
weeks ago, I didn't
Feels
get
like-
insurance or
Yeah.
anything, and I
It's
just
really,
thought,
you didn't have those
I'm gonna cross my fingers and
Yeah.
hope it all works out.
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
canceled our
Oh, the
flight
lit
to
ones, yeah.
Kansas City.
I actually put a green dot on
Cities,
it,
the small cities, some we canceled.
because especially in the wintertime,
Huge relief.
yeah,
Hops at
it
night.
pops out.
I didn't know how.
Is that
I was-
is that this
that-
month?
That was, yeah, it's next week.
Okay?
We're supposed to leave Wednesday, come back the following
Continuity.
You
Sunday.
know, I know you're getting ready to step down, so
It's actually much better.
I'm going to relax.
And that
Okay.
those were United.
I'm gonna be 65 on the.
And those were
Oh, wow.
expensive
And
flights
I
for
couldn't
Kansas City.
that.
I think on United, they were still like $500.
Like,
I'm so used to only flying
and
Southwest.
Me too. And.
That's when I was looking
Plus, I
for
never
flights
get
for
to-
Century.
We like plan our next Great Wolf
I was
Lodge
looking at
adventure.
everybody.
Yes.
And I couldn't believe it, like, I think it was $700.
So my
Where are we,
sister.
where are we gonna find another Debbie Tuttle?
Oh, you'll
Are
find
we
it.
gonna have to clone you, or?
But I'm here to support you guys after
For one way
so
on one
as a
Great.
team member and all of my team,
My
I'm
niece
here,
did that
I'm
when
right
she
here,
flew
all you
to see me.
call,
Awesome.
don't feel like you can't or don't want to or whatever.
It's like a whole new era though.
Hopefully it works out.
Yeah, I've got like a big list,
Good, well, yeah.
you know, that you know, I want.
I know my nephews have.
No, this is your baby too, like.
Yeah, and for
Is he in New York?
No, so he decided against New York City.
Okay.
They went out, him and my niece went out last March. And he's like, this isn't a college campus.
It's so bittersweet.
It's too much.
More me time.
I had.
So he ended up applying to
Practice
school
fire.
that he found.
Staying in my
I
pajamas
don't know how
until
he
2
found it,
o'clock,
but when you.
watching
Just
Hallmark.
And
And he's loving
Debbie, we've got to get you into the
Haven't
afternoon.
quite gotten there
He's gonna
yet.
come hang out with me that week.
Oh, well, I'm happy for you and sad at the same time, but so, like,
100% in agreement.
I waffle in anger. She wouldn't wait one with her.
Like, I don't worry.
I don't wanna
So
serve, I
retirement
mean,
is so much fun.
Well, it's
I don't know if you really need to see it.
really,
Yeah.
there's a few little infill things that we can do. The only thing about more that's down the road, you know.
Yeah.
that's some time.
Yeah.
I guess he's loving college. I
Stuff has
text
been
him
done.
periodically
So
and like, I'm just saying.
Thanks to you.
No, it's a team, but Marketplace is
Thinking about.
Yes,
It's-
yes.
It's doing really well over there.
That nose ring.
land them, you know,
Oh,
in
and
the.
my daughter has
But you need
My
to
sister
surround
was like,
me.
you
bull
see him,
thing.
give him a hard time. I can't believe he did that.
Yeah,
100.
yeah, I gave up a long time ago.
Oh.
On that stuff. She actually worked in daycare, my daughter did, and she would just like.
I'm
toss it
excited
up
for you,
there and
Debbie.
couldn't even
Yeah.
tell.
Are we gonna have a big party?
So you couldn't even.
We have to have a big party. It's happening.
If you ever need any
Do
advice
they
on
think
like
I
how to
asked
spend the
her
day
to-
doing
It's what
nothing,
I
let me know.
There is going to be a new pickleball run by my house.
Yeah.
Love it.
Last week was so funny because it's like, I had, instead of running into someplace
Actually,
random,
went to see the
I
Nutcracker
went to
downtown
yes,
with my mom years ago.
and
My daughter
over
was
at
like,
120th
I don't
and,
even know how old,
you know,
maybe 8.
Sheridan area, you know, over there. And there's a Japanese one.
It's pretty neat.
Well, yeah, we are,
I've never been in a store.
we're planning, to renew our vows on December 18th in, North Carolina.
Yeah.
I can
And then we're
always
gonna go
find
on a
something.
cruise.
That's a problem.
My mom bought our tickets and she wore.
So like.
You know,
We're gonna
you
sail
don't have to
around
only shop on the
South
weekends, I mean, it's,
Oh, that was originated from that.
Yeah.
Retired. She said.
so nice.
Great question. I can't remember where we're going. Like,
You
Private
can get
Island,
all the
the
stores that
Caribbean.
give you the senior discounts.
Maybe Grand Turk.
Whereas we've been working to pull
Yeah,
the ones
can't
that
remember. Yeah, I should I should know, but I can't remember.
Yeah, we
Arc on Tuesdays.
I spent way too much.
Yeah, so those are.
I love that.
Big plans.
Oh my
We've
gosh.
been working on it for a
They're
while
proud
now.
of their stuff, but like, it's good. It's good stuff. It's a really good stuff.
That's where I got that first.
It's gonna be like.
I bet
Vintage
every-
It's gonna be our
trench
first
coat.
one.
I bought it for like, I think
We just
about
haven't even quite
20
ready
for
yet.
$1,500.
Oh,
But I also, you know those like Contigo, have you heard of that brand? It's a brand of water bottles, and like you can turn them over and they don't leak. They had a brand new set of 3, but with straws, and Carolyn loves straws. She loves turning stuff over and squeezing it out. $5. And I bought it, and now she just shakes it, and no water comes out, and it gives me so much joy and her so much anger. So good. No spilling.
It's gonna be about a day and a half drive. Here to Minneapolis. Well, I have my dog.
Oh, you're gonna love
So,
it. It's
and
gorgeous.
one of my dog sitters, he's not,
Do you still want to?
there's a health issue, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna slip my dog.
Yeah.
No.
Thanksgiving, or do you want to try to?
Yeah, that's.
Thank you for playing that game. That was wonderful. Kim, did you have something that you wanted to wrap up with?
just gonna close it out and just say, we'll take all this information back and put it together, and Paul put stuff together. We'll probably have an internal meeting, and then we'll bring it back to you for your information.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to move on to the comprehensive plan update. Brooke Sabota, Director of Planning and Development, will introduce the item, and then Sarah Dusenberry, Senior Planner, will present the update to council. Welcome to you both.
Good evening once again, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. I'm just going to briefly introduce this item in saying that this is the final presentation to council before we wrap it up and bring back a final version to you, which we have scheduled, I believe, for the January
30th,
30th.
possibly, unless council needs that night for other things.
See, I was trying to like seed plant here to make it just stick. So, but our goal is to present the final version to you here in the first quarter of next year. And then once that final version is presented to you, we will then move forward with adoption, which Sarah will go into more detail. And I'm stealing one of her slides, I'm sure. So with that, I will yield the podium.
I miss your old PowerPoints, Brooke. The ones that would go on for hours, you know.
She's singular in that feeling. I'm just kidding. Go ahead,
Now you
Sarah.
didn't even give us a slide.
Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to run through quickly the kind of remaining sections. For the purpose, we're wanting to get feedback on those remaining topics that we have that have been developed by our resident task force. Those topics are the kind of final five are transportation, public safety, community health, parks and recreation, as well as housing. Starting with transportation, this section is really looking at taking that kind of multimodal approach to looking at the city's future, wanting to make sure that the goals and policies do recognize the need for safe and efficient movement throughout the city for any mode of transportation, but also really looking at how our kind of transportation can promote the least impact on our environment by making public transit, walking and bicycling, and electric vehicles or other alternative forms of vehicles easier, more accessible choices for our residents. So again, really looking at the use of electric vehicles, improving our roads, condition and safety, our residents' experience with public transit, as well as our bicycle and pedestrian facilities throughout the city. Looking at public safety, wanting to make sure that our goals and policies really address issues of real and perceived public safety concerns for all residents, really no matter their demographic indicator, socioeconomic status, or housing situation, and really wanting to make sure that the recommendations aim to provide an equitable and sustainable solutions that are really building on the kind of community-oriented approach we're already taking. To really empower our residents to champion their own neighborhoods with the support of the city. And one thing to really note with these goals and policies is it does look more broadly at public safety as not just a function of the police department, but that there are other factors to public safety that should be addressed. So here, going with community-based approaches, looking at all the work that our crisis response unit has already done and looking to expand their scope, reducing natural and man-made hazards for our residents, or kind of how to respond to them. And then looking to make sure that we meet the needs of both our unhoused and potentially homeless population, as well as then looking at our appearance and condition of our neighborhoods and how that plays into issues of neighborhood safety. For community health, really wanting to make sure that we can remove barriers to achieving a healthy and active lifestyle, as well as a higher quality of life for all of our residents. This section really addresses a pretty wide array of factors and looking at the environment, food access, pedestrian bicyclist connectivity, air quality, healthy homes, and mental health. And really just, again, wanting to make that healthier choice the easier choice for our residents. So again, convenient access for food, multimodal connectivity throughout the city, looking at preserving and improving air quality, of course, in Northglenn, but also taking a regional approach. It's kind of hard to bubble off Northglenn. Looking at educating our residents about healthy homes, and then maintaining the kind of our environment that promotes mental wellness, and then looking at how to create resilient neighborhoods that can withstand the effects of climate change. For parks and recreation, really focusing on supporting the current and future planning efforts that are kind of based off of the North Glen Parks Master Plan, but also noting that the trail system plays an important role in the mobility in the city, as well as, again, how climate change may affect the usage of our parks, trails, and open spaces. This section, if you notice, is a bit different, definitely but a bit shorter, and that is because it's really playing off the fact that the city has such a robust parks master plan, that the comp plan is primarily looking to support and kind of reaffirm the recommendations in that plan and kind of the future update for the plan. Looking at housing, primary goal is kind of really looking at maintaining and improving North Glen's relative affordability while being able to provide for the housing needs of all of our residents, and looking at addressing diversification of housing types, retention of residents, improving affordability for current residents, and creating more opportunities for moving up. And as you heard a couple weeks ago, this section is predominantly based off of the housing needs assessment that was completed earlier this year. And then this is the slide that Brooke kind of alluded to. We are working on a final kind of text draft actually right now that we'll be bringing to the Planning Commission with your comments added in, as well as the resident task force. And then potentially on January 30th, bringing you that kind of final draft design document that would then move forward to the Planning Commission again for adoption at a public hearing. So kind of a final way for the public to provide input on the plan. And then once it's adopted, it comes back to you guys for final ratification, either February 23 or that first quarter of the year. But that is all I've got, if you guys have any questions.
All right, I see one hand, Councilmember Kondo.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Sarah, I really appreciate this analysis. I have two questions, I hope you indulge me. My first question is, in the memo, you said that you basically had about 1,230 responses. So in a population of 38,000 roughly, do we feel like 3% is a statistically significant sample size? And the reason why I ask this question is, remember going back a couple meetings ago when we talked about pay-as-you-throw, I just want to wrap my head around what is a large enough sample size to really get a good cross view of our population at large.
So we kind of went into this knowing that the likelihood of hitting that statistically significant is not very common with these processes. We've tried our best to hit as many people as possible. Those responses are just based off the website alone. So we have attended a number of public events as well over the past 2 summers and falls to really try and get as much of a response as possible. And then as well as with the open houses. I would love for that number to be even higher. I don't know if there is a way for us to kind of, without extending this process immensely, to hit that statistically significant sample. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at with it.
This is about 3%, and I'm just.
Correct.
In my head, just trying to figure out what kind of effort does it take to get 5 or 7% of the.
Historically, we are really lucky to hit 3%. I mean, to me, I'm like, wow, that's a pretty good number, because we usually get even less.
Yeah. Okay. Brooke, you were going to say
Yeah,
something.
I just wanted to jump in on a couple of other anecdotes regarding engagement. So in talking with our website, we've had 2,500 unique IP addresses review the comp plan page, which is pretty significant when we look at the data heuristics in terms of how our internet interfaces with particular projects. I will say that, Councilmember Kondo, one of the things that we were tasked with when we started this process was what I would call a very, very robust, and we actually did an entire presentation to the council about our strategic approach with this, where what I would call like the guerrilla marketing tactics, where we have the neighborhood champions and we're the resident task force. And I will say we were also very intentional with the creation of all of these extra efforts to be very intentional about our socioeconomic diversity with the groups that we have, to the extent that we were capable of doing that. By way of comparison, I think we probably have had more public engagement with this process than we did with the UDO and the Civic Campus Master Planning process. I would say maybe the one that still probably is a distant second was the Parks and Rec Center public engagement exercise about the programming for that facility. So from a comparative standpoint, we've done, I think, much better with this exercise, but it is always a challenge. Comp plan is, I would say, one of the more drier, less, dramatic, get people fired up type of thing. It's like but we really have made an intentional effort.
Got
with
it.
that, so.
And my second question, I know that was an extended first question. So Sarah, you said on a couple slides, real and perceived, and I just, yes, perception is reality to people, but sometimes you wonder if on occasion, the types of people that respond are the people that are the squeaky wheels. And so all of a sudden, not only are you just chasing the average, but maybe you're chasing the people that are on the far extremes of the tail of the distribution curve. I wonder if you can comment about that. How do you make sure, you're not just necessarily chasing the few vocal minority when you're doing this kind of work?
In terms of engagement?
Yes.
I think the best what we kind of set up to do is, since we looked at going to as many of those public events as possible and a variety of them, so we were able to do the ward meetings as well as the grab and go, but also other kind of volunteer-based dinners, which hits a decent variety of residents in the city, as well as kind of other events. We were wanting to look at kind of utilizing that, but also, again, the website provides another avenue that could potentially open it up to different groups, just because of the access to it is a lot easier. We understand that there's a certain pretty clear population that comes to all of our events, and some of our events do tend to skew older, so we were hoping that the website starts to kind of hit that potentially younger population as well, and for people who may not be able to attend events because of work, because of X number of factors. So that's kind of where we were looking at that balance between trying to get as much engagement at events as well as kind of the more passive on your own time. The resident task force is also, I think, a decent mix of residents. It's gotten a little smaller as we've gone on over the year, but we do have a good core that has a bit of variation in that age. Still maybe some of the normal players, but I think it provided a little bit of a different voice. And I know for some of them, it was their first kind of big community engagement kind of thing that they've done. So I think we were able to hit at least a few new voices there from that small group as well.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Councilmember Brown and then Councilmember Jaramillo.
First of all, I believe I know what you're talking about when you say a healthy home, but explain to the residents what you mean by a healthy home.
What we're looking at in terms of healthy home is how this kind of systems of a home essentially can affect you. So some of the recommendations or the policies are looking at reducing or remediating mold growth. We are a city that the vast majority of our houses were built when asbestos was still a very common material that's used. So providing educational materials on how to handle that. If you're looking at renovating your home, could that potential process be? And really just making sure that kind of other issues, I think we've had comments on radon as well as rodents as an issue. So really just kind of that as a whole of kind of how your house is built and faring, and kind of what is that effect on air, your water quality in your house, things of that nature.
Okay.
So it's very education-based, these policy recommendations are for that one.
When I go back, I'm sorry, can I go again?
Go ahead, yeah.
When I go back to page 14, on your transportation goals, and I bring this up because I think the planning commission's doing something on it, but Heather, I think that at some point, we need to talk about number one, and the ability to use electronic vehicles, for instance, like an electric bike, in our parks and in our walkways,
Yeah.
Because we can't just encourage the use of it and then have signs hanging around that say you can't use your electric vehicle at EV Rains. You can't use your electric bikes and stuff like that. So,
And we do recognize that because that's definitely was a concern of our resident task force and their experience on the trails with electric bikes, is that as kind of part of education for proper safety, it's not just how to bike on a road, but what is the effect of your potential electric bike on trails with people who are moving at much slower speeds and how those work together. So there's definitely policy that looks at educating our residents on how to best handle that kind of combination of different
Yeah.
movement and speed.
because right now, when I was at the park about a month and a half ago, the ranger was explaining to me that the electric scooter wasn't allowed in the parks.
Okay.
So, and he showed me the sign and it was all totally cool for me because we have the sign up there, right? And I shouldn't be trying to ride an electric scooter anyhow. But I thought it was, we're saying one thing and then we're not allowing for another thing. And then I just have one more, Mayor Pro Tem, and then I'll
And can
be
I just
quiet.
quickly add, Councilmember Brown, that's coming to council for discussion on November 21st.
Yeah, ooh. I don't see anything in here about water conservation. Was that not a,
That was a previous section, so we do have a water resources section. It was presented, I think, June 6th.
okay, and then I'm gonna throw this one at Heather really quick. Heather, do you have it scheduled for us to have a conversation around drought-resistant landscaping?
Yeah,
That is part of, Brooke, you coupled that with,
That's part of the UDO.
Okay.
update.
When we come back to that?
We are, on the planning side, we're setting the schedule for that, because it has to go to the planning commission first. One of the things that we're working on with that and parking on an improved surface, because I raised that to the top of the errata, is to make sure that we have code enforcement vet it through, because usually they have a whole what-if exercise that we do with them to make sure before we bring it forward. But we should have a schedule on that here probably after Wednesday this week as to when we'll be setting that forward for council.
and
Okay.
I believe it's probably going to be 2023
Yeah.
at the earliest, January,
At this point,
February.
That's what we're looking at, but.
As long as we can have a comprehensive discussion about it before spring, that would be awesome.
Our goal is to get that in place so that we have something that'll help us better manage the
Right.
landscape, so.
And I don't want to go into, I had a lot of residents that were upset this last couple weeks. So you're obviously aware that it's the foliage versus rocks, basically, and we're kind of talking out of both hands, at the same time. So as long as they're coming out.
it's confusing.
Yeah. Both sides of my mouth, isn't that what I said, Jay?
All right. Councilmember Jaramillo?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Under public safety goals, number 3, reduce the impacts of natural and man-made hazards. Would that be trimming down a lot of the, say, native grasses or shrubs that are around, like when you're turning your vehicle? I know it's like quite a few times when I'm making turns in my car, I have to like creep up pretty far just to like be able to see where I'm turning if the car is not coming in certain situations, like on 112th and Irma, on Malley and Pearl, and a lot of them are been installed by the city.
Okay.
So that's just a concern I'm sure other people have. We hate to get in a car accident in our neighborhood, even just a block away, So is that something that's, I think somebody brought it up a while ago, but I can still see it, like potentially things like that happen.
Are you talking in terms of the kind of visual kind of blocking of sight or the effect? That hasn't been specifically discussed, but I think that definitely has a place to look at kind of the city's maintenance of the kind of right-of-ways. And we can definitely bring that to the task force and kind of figure out how that might play a role. But it hasn't been necessarily specifically brought up yet, but we can definitely look at that.
Okay, cool. And another one that I have is also when we have parking signs, let's say by a school district, and it says a school zone, and it says no parking from here to the corner. And sometimes I mean, it works great most of the time, but then you'll have it where there's another, let's say like you're leaving your street to your house and like cars are blocking in like this, and let's say there's like 2 SUVs or big trucks and you can't see, you can't take a left turn because you think you're gonna get, sandwiched between 2 cars so I mean, I think that'd be a good idea to look at that too, and especially by schools, it just gets packed up, and I experience it every day. I get to see.
Absolutely.
I'm not the only person. Is that there? Oh, okay.
So looking at kind of the education or kind of signage around parking on the streets and its effect on kind of sightlines for drivers.
Yeah, I think that'd be effective. I mean, it works for the side where they put where they say like to this point, but then there's another side of the street where it's like everybody else is, it's stacked up right there, so you can't really see.
Okay.
And this probably isn't your department, but I've been a big, I've been like looking for flashing crossing signs for school zones too, like press the sign, it lights up.
Yep.
I mean,
I know that, as part of I think it's on probably transportation, talks about kind of making the safety for our pedestrians and bicyclists a priority, and kind of continuing that further research and relationship we have with Public Works on implementing those kind of measures. The Connect North Glen Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan, I know, speaks to a lot of those types of signals and recommendations, and they are working through kind of that implementation, and the plan also calls for prioritization of that implementation. So it may not be specifically called out to say put those signals, but the plan does call out to prioritize that implementation of the PED bike plan. So that should cover that kind of thing. And I know Public Works does a lot with the school zones specifically in improving that safety.
and I also did notice a lot more signing in, let's say by the pedestrian tunnel that lists out when, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, between this certain time, they're cleaning it out and stuff. I mean, I've had residents in Ward 2 tell me about there's situations that's going on around Safeway, and like if there's like any way we can put more signage in like those public places where a lot of different, like where people keep their belongings for a certain amount of time. I mean, that I've just had people hit me up. It's worked for having the signage there that clearly states what the city intends to do. So I've seen it work. Like in the small amount of time that we've done more of that, and wanted to see if that would be expanded, because that's one of most of the calls that I get is.
It's something I can talk with Debbie Tuttle about. Those properties that you're referring to, Councilmember Harami, or it's private property. So it wouldn't be the city posting signage, but we could certainly talk with those property owners. Debbie's in continual communication with them, and we can relay that information to them and see if we can't help them do more to address the issues that they're having.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right, I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'm going to jump in. You all have done a great job. Like, this is fantastic. I feel like it's a really awesome overall roadmap for the direction that Northland's going to be going, and it's almost like it incorporates absolutely everything. Everything is so connected in here, and so I just want to say thank you, because I know that this has been a very long process that was interrupted by COVID, and I feel like you all have continued to be thoughtful and resourceful and resilient at every turn in terms of figuring out how you're engaging with our residents. And I really appreciate it. And I feel like what you've brought forward to us is just, it's a really awesome, exciting vision. So thank you. And I just wanted to make sure that I acknowledged all of the work that you all did here. Thank you. Councilmember Goff.
And that's basically, I was waiting to make sure the question
Yeah.
said the same thing, because I know a lot of work went into this. And I did see people at the Bruise Grub and other things, and I know you guys, it is very frustrating for everyone here that you try really hard to get input from residents, and you can't get it, and you can't get it, and yet when something they don't like happens, then they're like, I never heard anything about this. So it is frustrating. So I appreciate the effort you guys did to put this together, very well put together, and lots of good ideas.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Awesome. Is there anything else that you need from us?
Nope.
Okay.
That's good direction. We'll move forward.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much. All right, last but certainly not least, Brooke, are you back? Just kidding, I know. I'm just teasing. All right, so last item on our agenda, current challenges facing police department staffing. Police Chief Jim May will present the item to council. Welcome, Chief May. Thank you for being so patient with us tonight.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem, Council, good evening. Actually, I was talking to Heather. Some of the things, we did make some changes at the police department. We thought we'd bring that forward to council so you guys can understand what we're going through right now. Never in my career have I seen such a competitive market for police officers. So other departments, and I think that goes back to people applying, right? We don't have that. We used to get 200-300 applicants, and now we're lucky to get 40 or 50. So what other agencies, and we're not the only one in that same boat. So there's other agencies doing the same thing. They're offering signing bonuses and everything else. So one of the things that we decided to do is trying to figure out how we can still maintain our operations and make sure that we have the staffing available throughout. So as of November 4th, we moved to 12-hour shifts. What that afforded us to do was put a sergeant and 7, and that's a consistent team. They'll be working together throughout this time period. As you see in some of the graphs that were provided to you, if you go on the first one, that's a patrol division, you'll see the 28 actual positions we currently have there. Budgeted is 43, and you'll see a 15 under vacancy with an asterisk. And the asterisk is actually to show not only the vacancies we have to hire for, which is currently at, we just lost one Friday, so 9 vacancies we currently have, but the others are in some type of training process. So they're either in the academy, finishing up the academy, where we have 3 there. We have 4 in our FTO phase. So with those individuals, that's where we're at. So they're not actually working and on the street. They're in some type of training process. The other thing too is when we average about 140 calls for service a day, and spread out when our minimum staffing requirements on day shift is 1 and 3, which is thin, and then 1 and 4 on swings, and then 1 and 3 on graveyards. So with this 1 and 7, it gives more of an opportunity, because on that shift, when an officer is, field training officer is training a recruit, they're not doing 100% of the work, right? Because they're training mode and everything else. So they probably do about 50, 60%, depending on what phase that recruit is in the FTO process. The FTO process is 20 weeks long. So that's another process that we're looking at. So again, with that 1 and 7, that helps us cover that. So it spreads out the calls, spreads out the workload. But working 12-hour shifts, 6 to 6 is challenging, right? So currently they butt up against each other. And so each team will have officers that'll come in early to spread that gap a little bit, so they're not responding to calls, so we can reduce hangover, or officers where they come in where they have to do overtime and transports and everything else. With that amount, a lot of times if we get a late arrest and their minimum staff, the officer that made the arrest stays over to do a transport to the county, which can take up to a couple hours, right? So we just want to make sure that, the staffing and the public safety is still maintained with those minimum staffing things, or staffing requirements. The other thing too that affects us is, we have, which is a great, with our, and I get that mixed up. I keep wanting to say FMLA, but that's not what it currently is. And Tamara would probably yell at me because I said that word where it's not. But some of that, it was used where we had 5 people on that this last year, and we currently have 2. We have modified work duties, which we have several that work the desk because of maybe injury or pregnancy where they have to come off the road, so we don't want to endanger the baby. That's really important when they notify us that they're having a baby, that we say, hey, this is Because unfortunately, sometimes this is a very physical job. So I want to make sure I protect my officers. And that's another big thing too. With the amount of calls for service we do, when we're making minimum staff, I want to make sure that we have the officers available, that they can respond and they can do it safely. And that's also for the community as well. You know, officer presence, the more officers that we have at an incident, it kind of de-escalates and help de-escalates that situation. So I know I gave the doom and gloom, you know, where we're sitting, but it's not bad, right? So some of the things that I think are positive, I talked about some of the positive, you know, spreading out the workload, doing that. The other thing with that, we're able to maintain our 2 traffic officers, because I know you guys get a lot of grief and get hit up on that. So again, that's, you know, prioritizing, making sure that they're in place, so they're taking some of that, you know, off of the officers working the road. It also gives the officers, when you lighten the load of calls for service, when they're taking so many calls for service, and you spread it out to 6 or 7 officers, then it gives them in some free time where they can also do, you know, direct patrol, where, you know, they're out there patrolling neighborhoods, or out there looking for burglaries, or out there doing extra traffic enforcement. So I think that's another thing that's a benefit. The goal is, and currently we have 9 officers, or 9 people in the process. We just gave job offers, so we hired 4. And then out of 3 are going to the academy. 1 is post-certified. And then we have 5 still in our process that we held in August. And that 5, we have 3 of them that would go to the academy, or no, I'm sorry, 2 of those would go to the academy. And then we have 2 post-certified and 1 lateral. Lateral means that they have actually experience in law enforcement, so they're easy to come in and go through the FTO. 1 with post-certified, we still have to put them through a 6-week in-service, but we don't have to put them through a 22-week academy. So the goal on that, so we're you know, hiring some of those positions, trying to get those in place. We also have 3 others that just applied over the last couple weeks, 2 that are laterals and 1 that is post-certified. So with those individuals, if we move them through the background, they can probably start with the academy group that's graduating in December, and then we'll have a full academy class. But with that academy class, with all those laterals and post-certified, we have to train like 9 officers. And that's a huge burden on our FTOs, but it's an important one right now. So doing this structure gives us some breathing room where we can move into, you know, next summer. And I see us at least the 12-hour shifts this summer, and it might be longer, depending how many officers we lose and everything else, just to make sure we maintain that level of service that our community has become accustomed to. But there's some things, you know, you might have asked me for some stuff, and I'm gonna say, you know what, I don't have that availability to do that right now, right? So, so that's another thing too, is be patient. You know, I understand, I hear the complaints, we're working towards it. I think we're in, unfortunately, we do have some officers that I heard are in testing processes with larger organizations, and that's, you know, they have to do what they, because we can only offer so much at Northland, right? Special assignments, other things, but one thing that I think we all pride ourselves on is the customer service that our department does, right? And I think that's a high priority in the culture. The other thing too that I'm real happy about on these about 9 officers that we're currently going to hire, you know, 50% of them very diverse, you know, so we're continuing with that goal that council came up with years ago and trying to really reflect what our community looks like. And that's another thing I'm very proud of. And my background investigators, everything else, we're working really hard around the clock trying to get those positions filled so we don't lack the service. But with that, I tried to not keep you guys too long, but I'll open it up to questions and or concerns that you may have. And that's it. I'll stop talking.
Thank you for the update, now you're a council member. I don't know.
I don't know why, I don't want that job.
I apologize, Chief May. I've got 2 hands right now, so we'll start with Councilmember Kondo and then Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. So I'm just kind of reflecting upon my ride-along in the first month that I was on board, and I just think to myself, does the 12 hours include the amount of time that an officer needs before he goes on shift to prepare his service weapon and the vehicle and all that? Or is that going to be additional time plus the 12 hours?
No, so it's going to be 6 to 6, right? So they'll come in and, the officers, and some of them prep beforehand, but that's why we have the 2 officers on that pause to span that gap of time, right? They come in an extra hour early, so we can get the officers that are pre them off in time, and then those that are coming on, time to get ready and get their cars ready to go and go out,
So the 12 hours does include the prep time?
Yep, it does.
I wanted to be sure.
But you've been on a ride along, so you know that sometimes 12 hours can turn into 13 or 14 depending on a call.
Oh, for sure.
So with 140, how I just visualize this, so we get 140 calls a day. And we actually don't put our hand in it, but they come in. But you reach in, you have no idea what that next call is going to be. It could be something that's minor where one of our residents had a question that we can answer in 5 minutes, or it can be something major where we have to shut down the whole highway for hours, and that takes a lot of resources. Or, this year we've been plagued with way too many homicides and attempt homicides in our community, and that takes a lot of time and a lot of resources as well. Our investigators have totally stepped up. As you can see in the graph, they are fully staffed. Some of them are volunteered to come off, say get a sergeant off on time, because that's another thing we have to do. We have to make sure that they get the rest time and, the mental health time off so they can take vacations and everything else. But my detectives totally stepped up and said, hey, if you need an acting supervisor, because they have a ton of experience, they said they would come out and help patrol. So we're in this together, and when I hear that stuff, it just makes me super happy that, we're just a great team, and, whatever it takes to be successful, we're going to be successful. Maybe not to that high thing right now, since, we are short-staffed, but, I think we're definitely going to get there.
So that leads me to my second follow-up question, if you'll indulge me. So since we now are going into the winter and we don't have as many special events like Pirate Fest and all this other stuff, I'm assuming that this quiet time will allow for some decompression. But if we were to ask for some additional special operations and things like that, how will that impact, your capacity and also that reserve buffer? Is that gonna, are you pretty much at your wit's end here?
So,
pretty
and
much?
I noticed that during Safe Street Halloween, which is one of those events that the police department prides itself on. And, when we put that out for officers to help, there's only a couple that put in when normally it's like 15. They're tired. They've worked really hard over this last year. So if we do have something extra, I don't think I'll burden them. I will show up if you guys need me. I'll do that. Commander Osgood, he's another one that if you need us, we'll be there. We'll pick up that slack for our officers, right? So that's what we should do as leaders. And so Heidi, Commander Waltz, Deputy Chief Darlin, we will try to cover some of those things if you need us at those ward meetings, if you need us, throughout this year. And I'm hoping we can get back to 10-hour shifts where we can, be fully staffed there so we can, engage and do some of those meetings where officers take on some of those roles. But it might be a little longer. So I just, again, this tonight is like, hey, I just want to let you know where we're at. It's not totally doom and gloom. We'll still be able to go out and provide that level of service.
Okay, great, thank you.
Councilmember Brown.
Hello, Chief. Is there, I'm reading this section, it is actually on page 3 of 4, where it describes the 12-hour work schedules. 3 days, the first time will be, it looks like there's 4 12-hour days, and then the following week there would be 3 12-hour days. So since in the state of Colorado, overtime is paid anything over 40 hours.
For law enforcement, it's 80.
80?
Yep.
In
So there is-
2-week period?
Yep, 2-week period.
So there is no implication to budget or anything like that?
So that's a great point. I mean, I forgot to talk about that. There will be, each officer, 4 hours of overtime every pay period. However, supervisors will try to see if they can cut them out loose if they're, very heavy that day, a couple hours. But if not, some of the things that we have spent a lot of money on in overtime over, and that's another thing that we evaluated, was there's a lot of officers we had to call in to fill shifts, right? So, before we had 6 shifts that we had to fill, now we have 4.
Okay.
And so I think we're gonna see our overtime budget actually reduce rather, even with that extra 4 hours, if we had to pay the officers for that 4 hours, and we couldn't get them off.
I have two more, is that okay? How do the officers feel about going to a 12-hour shift? Are they positive about it? Are you getting any pushback?
I think mixed reviews right now. They're on it. I haven't heard much complaining. Commander Osgood being the patrol commander, he might have more insight to that. It is, again, when that long 12 hours, and he's managing his lieutenants and his sergeants and his officers, so have you heard anything that probably half?
Mayor Pro Tem, State
Oh, yeah,
Council.
please.
I've got a little bit, but I always try to point out the silver lining.
Commander, can you come to the podium for the benefit
You got to be
of the-
recorded.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes, I've heard a little bit of pushback, but overall not as much as I expected. And I always try to point out the silver lining. They do get that extra day off, that 4-day weekend every other day, so that helps. So I didn't get the pushback I thought we would. Commerce City went to this several years ago. They had a lot of pushback at first. Now they don't want to go back. So,
Right.
so we're definitely trying to look at the advantages of this, to sell this, to make it, good feelings and bad feelings are contagious. So we're trying to push look at this, the silver lining and the advantage to this. Also, you do have more officers working. They feel safer. They have more officers respond to those calls where there is potential for violence. We have the ability to have more officers respond to that. So, and then the overtime, as Councilman Kondo brought up too, that we're looking at some of the overtime with that too, is constantly getting pulled in lately on your days off to cover these shift shortages. This should help that, because we've done away with some of the overlap from swings and graves and then from days to swings to help compress that, so we have more officers working at a time. So we're trying to really show the advantages of this.
And then just one more. I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep my words brief.
Floor is yours.
So, for the benefit of the residents and for some of our newer council people, and I don't, when we say that we have all these people going into the academy, right? I think I counted 5.
I'm hoping to send, we have 5 left. I'm hoping to send 6. But again, we're still in backgrounds on 5, right? Actually
Okay.
7, that we need to make sure that they get through the backgrounds. And we probably will lose because there are other processes
Yeah.
as well. But best case scenario, I'm sending 6 in January
Yeah,
to the academy.
so let's talk about that. You remind me what the success rate is, percentage-wise, coming out of the academy. We put 6 people in, we're going to expect 4 to come out, maybe?
Probably, again, where we'll lose maybe 20 to 30%.
Yeah.
Of an FTO. And we just lost an individual that, great young person, young man. I was looking forward to it. And it was, the pace of Northland is super fast.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we are a busy little city, and our officers have to take on and learn a lot really quick. And some, starting out in this career at Northglenn is challenging. It's a tough job. It's a lot different than it was when Ron and I started 30 years ago, right? We didn't have the volume of calls. We didn't have all the systems that you have to learn from the report writing, the computers, the MDTs in the cars, the radar, the camera systems. I mean, the body-worn cameras is another thing. So all that thrown at you. Plus, guess what? You got to be a police officer and go out there and handle all these calls. And, they're very complex. You never know what you're going to get. You're going to have to apply CRS. Some people struggle that, where sometimes it's, we talk to them, say, hey, here you weren't successful, but I've built a strong relationship with other chiefs in the area where I said, hey, I have this individual, and we've referred them, and, they would give them a chance. And they've been excelling at some of those smaller agencies and learning the job. And then someday they can say, you know what, Northglenn did right by me. And when they learn the job, they can come back to us as a lateral. So, we'll put them out there. We'll do our best to set them up for success for that next step. But yeah, you're right. It is about 20 to 30% rate that wash out. But
Yeah, well-
that doesn't make it through their field training. A lot of them make it through the academy. This was the first time this last year was the first time we ever had someone that didn't make it through the academy, which was very surprising. But again, trying to coach them and guide them on what they do for next steps, we might see that individual again.
Post-certified, just to clarify the meaning of that, that means that somebody has gone through the academy some way,
Somewhere,
through some
yes,
city.
other agency or something else that they went through. And so that's us. So we do a $5,000 signing bonus for those that are post-certified or lateral coming to us, paying for that, which we were the first ones back, you and I went to Heather and said, hey, we really need to do this just to draw people. And I think it was 2018, 2019 when we started. It was, 2019.
barely.
So we were one of the first ones to do it, but then everybody saw, and we were getting great applicants and everything else, from those. But now other agencies have done that. They're offering $10,000, $15,000 signing bonuses, some of these larger agencies. And, some of our officers are like, wow, I can go over there, topped out officer and make, get an extra $15,000 bonus. And, they're young in their careers, they can make that change. But it's not as, I tell them, it's not going to be as good as Northglenn. You're going to miss us.
Yeah, the grass is not always greener on the
Yeah.
other side. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Chief, I don't see any other hands.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you, Commander Osgood. All right, are there any other items for council this evening? Okay, hearing none, we're adjourned. Yay.
Thank you.